Okay, we're going to get started here now. Welcome, everybody, to the May 15th RTM committee meetings. Let's all please stand for the pledge. Okay, thank you. First up on our agenda tonight, Mr. Papa George and the AC Building Committee.
Good evening, everyone. As you're all aware, we were lucky enough to receive grants for the indoor air quality from the state of Connecticut, and part of that is to establish a building committee to be eligible for it. We have 3 members that were selected and voted on by the Board of Selectmen that are before you tonight. David Becker, Jason Lee, and Rodney, and I'm going to kill his last name.
Looks like Van Duzen to me, Jr.?
Yes. Okay. If there's any questions, be happy to answer them. We have 2 of the members in the audience as well tonight if you have questions for them.
Okay, well, I guess we'll start with Mr. Becker. Welcome, David, and you can just, if you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself. I know we have it all in the backup, but reasons why you might want to take on this job.
Yeah, good evening. Background-wise, former member of this body, former member of the Board of Finance, and certainly over the years, the indoor air quality issues have arisen, during many discussions. So hearing this possibility for the funding, I've been following it along a little bit as it got closer to passing federal through state down to the local level, and have an interest in it. Certainly think it's an important topic and think I can lend some expertise to help make sure that we get it implemented on time. It's a particularly tight deadline that we are under, and it seems to be a committee that's going to be pretty focused and be helpful. So, any questions?
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Becker from the body? Representative Gerber?
I just want to make a comment how nice it is and comforting it is to have you on this, you and Mr. Lee, people with a lot of experience. This is a huge project, hugely important project, and a lot of the children and teachers are going to thank you for stepping up. So thanks, David.
Thank you for the kind words.
Thank you, Representative Gerber. Representative Georgiadis?
Hi, Drew Georgiadis, District 9. So in the past, when we have tried to upgrade windows or air conditioning, we've run into some other issues, PCBs and whatnot. Would you support all additional things so that we can make this possible? Because I seem to remember in the past that you might have voted against town spending on air conditioning.
I'd have to go through my whole voting record to figure that out exactly, but I would actually I would say as far as that record typically would have probably fallen more so than in favor of the projects than otherwise. If I had any issues related to PCBs on that front, I'm the only one I could think of that I might have. It would have concerned Ludlow, and I think that on that one I more than likely ultimately voted, but again, you'd have to pull the records and go back and do that. But I would say on projects like that, it was more making sure that we were being prudent from a fiscal perspective and addressing it, and there's a lot of different ways that we can go about handling these projects. But ultimately, if they're in the buildings and they're regulated and they need to be out, I would have supported them to be removed. I would do the same as far as these overall projects. I think it might be a little out of scope probably for what we're ultimately charged with from a mechanical installation and things like that. But, I mean, I don't know if that answers, I don't know exactly where you're going.
No,
so
no,
I
it
just,
does. It just, sometimes you run into other issues, and it needs to be done correctly, so.
Yeah, I mean, so my philosophy on anything, and I think even if you look back at some of those, yeah, my philosophy is that you do it right the first time, and you do it with a 50-year arc, and you plan that you don't have to go back. So, I very much so appreciate the indoor air quality issue, you know, and the need to do that. I always have. So, you know, again, I don't know if there's somewhere you find like I didn't vote on some amendment to something or whatever, but I actually, if you go through my track record, it was typically, I feel like I took probably more heat than anything else for how much stuff I probably approved over the years in favor. But you know, taking a critical look at something is also important, and I think that that's my approach to things, is to critically, you know, dig into an issue. And, you know, one of the things that I would say from that perspective, just sitting more in your shoes or on the other board in your and everyone's shoes, was the inability sometimes to do anything other than look at the final, what's been brought before me. So I would say in this particular instance, one of the benefits will actually to be, you know, at the seat of being able to try to attempt to fix whatever goes before the boards before that. So if there's an opportunity related to those things, it's hard to predict the exact exactly how, you know, I would handle it as, you know, one of the members of the committee, but the ability to try to intercept that at that stage and produce the best end result, I think will actually be refreshing from that perspective, because it is hard when you get up and downs, so to be judged by that. And I would just say that I think, you know, I've gone on record for years of being in favor of projects like this and getting these things done the
David,
right way.
I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but
Anyway, thank you, David.
I think, from
As a
what I
mother-
understand about this committee, you guys are just keeping this on track and approving checks and costs, not worrying about that other stuff is somebody else's problem, I believe.
Anyway, I wanted to say thank you for your response, your thoughtful response. As a mother of 4 Ludlow High School graduates, I look forward to improved air quality. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Georgiadis. Any other questions? Representative Wolk.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Representative Wolk, District 5. I really don't have a question. I have more than, I'm very happy to see both of you on this committee. I've been an advocate for air conditionings, putting air conditioning in our schools since I came on this board almost 10 years ago. So to see this come to fruition and to see you, David, and you, Jason, on this board is really good to see, because I know, Jason, you've been on other committees, building committees with Mr. Quinn. So I'm happy to both of you there. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Wolk. Representative Gerber.
Yeah, hi, Bill Gerber, District 2. I have a question, not maybe for Mr. Becker, but it's really for Angeles. Is that appropriate?
Well, let's see what it is, and we'll decide.
Two questions. One is Mr. Van Dusen's not here, and I was just curious: is he a rep from the Town Facilities Commission, since he is still technically on that commission? That's my first question. Yeah.
So he's on the Standing Building Committee, and he still is a member of that committee.
Okay. So he can do both, or is he representing the Standing Building Committee?
He will sit on both. He's not representing the Standing Building Committee.
Oh, okay. Because he's also on the Town Facilities Commission, the TFC. Okay.
That's been defunct since I've been in this position. We have not used them.
Okay. I think technically it's still in existence. Yeah.
Yes.
My second question is Mr. Popper, you were going to talk to an energy consultant. They were going to come and do an assessment. And I was wondering, for the air conditioning, this pretty massive project, are you going to be looking at basic, sort of air conditioning systems, or is there an energy efficiency sort of new technology angle to this? And Mr. Becker, feel free to chime in if that's something you would want to
Mr.
say.
Moderator, that's not related to the building committee. This should be about putting people on the building
Yeah,
committee,
Bill,
not the project.
thank you, Representative Iacono. This isn't about the project, it's just about the committee.
Right.
The
but-
representative on the committee for tonight. If you have other questions concerning the project itself, I think we should ask that through me after tonight, or separately to Mr. Papa George.
Can I ask Mr. Becker if he would like to look at other technologies? other
I
than-
don't think that's within
No.
their purview.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Gerber. Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Becker. Mr. Lee?
Good evening. How are you? I'm Jason Lee. I was a former RTM member. I was the chairman of the Holland Hill Building Committee, and I'm currently the chairman of the Mill Hill Building Committee, which in June will be disbanded. So I'm back for more fun.
Glutton for punishment. Any questions for Mr. Lee? He has a track record of being on these committees for the schools, so. Representative Bastilli.
Sharon Bastilli, District 3. I just wanted to say thank you for stepping up for this important project.
Thank you, Representative Bastilli. Any other comments? All right, Jason. Thank you. You can go home and watch the Yankee game. Thank you, Mr. Papa George. No, you have to stay here. Okay, next item up is the Kings Highway pedestrian grant. Mr. Hurley?
Good evening.
Good evening, Bill.
The town of Fairfield has received a commitment to fund letter from the state DOT for $2,147,800 for the Kings Highway Phase 3 project. This project is a continuation of Phases 1 and 2 that left off along Kings Highway, right out here, outside this building, at Villa Avenue, and will continue towards the Bridgeport line. Sidewalks, curbs, median or a road diet, ADA ramps, pedestrian phase improvements, and turf establishment are some of the components of the project. The grant includes construction administration, inspection, and testing. The amount is paid up front and is based on contract bid prices. Basically, as I said, we had phases 1 and 2 that went pretty well, and now we're continuing on to this third phase. We had a public meeting a couple of years ago, I think it was just before COVID, and some of the RTM members that are here today were even at that meeting as well and have the support of the project.
Thank you, Mr. Hurley. Representative Garskoff?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and thank you, Mr. Hurley. Josh Garskoff, District 5. So there was talk back, I was one of those members, there was talk about trying to create some crosswalks, that were more beneficial to pedestrians, and I don't think that ever came to fruition. I don't exactly recall why. Similarly, there was greenery really wasn't able to be worked in. Those were two things that kind of were hoped to happen and didn't happen. Could you just remind me why that didn't happen and reflect on whether that could happen in this next phase?
Yeah, well, again, this is for, we still have to do the design of the project, which was approved last year. And so once we get this funding in place, we'll start with the design and then go from there. The difference between this section and the past section is that we were limited in the right-of-way. We are still limited right-of-way here, but depending on there's two possible designs that we have. One of the designs is what they call road diet, where we take the median out and actually narrow the road a little bit. But then by doing that, we'll be able to widen the sidewalk, and we'll be able to reduce the pedestrian crossing distance, and then perhaps create grass areas separation from those sidewalks. That is the method of design. The other method of design involves that if, based on the consultant's engineer report and all the data that will be collected, the state does not allow us to do that, we're going to have to relocate utility poles so that we can be able to have the sidewalks wide enough to meet the ADA. So we're hoping for the first one, but just like the other one, I can't promise until we do a full survey and design.
Thank you. So that's what happened last time is that, yeah. And it related to that, the poles that wound up just being sort of cemented into the sidewalks in some cases, right? So is that part of that story too?
Yeah, the side, right now, if you were to walk along the sidewalk, say by the cemetery, the utility poles are smack dab in the middle of the sidewalk, which obviously is not acceptable.
But I mean, even in the new sections, the sidewalks are much wider, but the poles are sort of the sidewalk went right up around the poles. I
Right,
think.
again,
Yeah.
limited, we couldn't go into the
Yeah.
roadway, and we didn't want to put
Yeah.
the poles on private property, then you have to get a whole mess of easements to do that. And so but they do meet PROAG and ADA, because we went with wider sidewalks. In the case where the pole is on the very edge of the sidewalk, we still have at least 48 inches, and in some cases, even 5 feet of separation or clearance, so that we meet the requirements.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Garskoff. Representative Volk?
Representative Wolk, District 5. Hi, Bill. Good to see you again. So the first part of that project, I recall I was part of that also, and you came through. So my question is with the lighting. So, you know, I've been discussing with you for, I guess, a couple of years about doing traffic lighting, putting arrows in traffic lighting, not making separate lanes, but putting the arrow in to give people a chance to cross. So one of the things what I was thinking of is now that you were doing the project at Villa, I think you said you guys were doing some kind of a study on that light where Villa meets where Stop and Shop, that whole area right there.
No, not
Is that
that,
part of
not
it?
that
That's not
light.
part of it.
We go from the sidewalk where it ends by that diner, and then continues down towards the Moody light at Moody Avenue and Tungus Hill Cutoff South and Route 1 there. That light, we will reanalyze and, if necessary, make any changes
Okay.
there.
So-
But that would be the pedestrian crossing that we were lacking on the other one.
On the other, okay.
Yeah, this one will have a pedestrian crossing there.
Okay, and arrows, remember, is that where, that part where you can?
Let me just explain.
I want to thank you very much for the arrow
If-
that you
yeah,
put in there.
Thank you. If we do the road diet, the middle lane could be used as a separate left turn lane, and we'd be able to do, arrows that way. If not, then they have something called a lead green, where one side could get the green first, and then that would be the arrow to, clear out the first couple of cars
Yeah,
anyway.
it definitely helps. Thank you. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you, Representative Volk. Anybody else? Representative Graceffa.
Hey, Bill. How you doing? One of the things I noticed with the first phase, and I just want to get some assurance in the second phase, are the crosswalks that are going parallel to Kings Highway, that when we're putting in new ADA ramps, that we're making sure that all the crosswalks are striped. A lot of the new ADA ramps in town, they're providing accessible ramps, but they're not, the stripes aren't painted on the ground to signal the crosswalks to the traffic. So can you just speak to that real quick? And then also the second question is, with the road diet, what is the metric that you're sort of using on evaluating whether or not a road diet is appropriate? And if it actually, there's two things, I guess, shortening the pedestrian crossing time, as well as trying to slow down the traffic to allow just for safer streets or overall? So what's sort of your performance metric that you're going to be directing the engineers on?
Okay, let me break it up again with the crosswalks. This is a state highway, so any pavement markings or signs, even though they're on the side streets, still have to be approved by the DOT. They are slowly changing over where they do allow us to do some of the crosswalks. Sometimes it depends on volume or crossing distance. It might even, when I say volume, I'm talking about vehicle volume, but it could also involve the pedestrian volume, and it depends. Now, the one that's signalized with the five-way intersection, that one I'm pretty sure will have crosswalks, and we can look at those. But other times, the state will not, they don't allow the crosswalk there. Because then what happens there is by putting the crosswalk in, it sounds crazy and counterproductive, but then you have to move the stop sign, back. And if there's a bad sight distance there, that might be another reason why they don't have the crosswalk. But we can certainly push for that a little bit harder than perhaps we've done in the past. I'm thinking for the most part, this is on a straightaway. We don't have to worry about a curve. So I think the chances are better that we would get that for the crosswalk. For part two, just refresh my memory of what that was.
It was about regarding the road diet, sort of evaluating the suitability. The only difference, this is sort of probably nerd talk, but like, removing the median necessarily, that's also going to be like a pedestrian refuge in the middle of a road. So it's sort of like 6.5 dozen of another. You might be reducing the overall road width, but you're not necessarily reducing the speed of traffic going down Kings Highway. So just want to know what the metric and the evaluation criteria you're using.
It's strictly based on volumes that we're able to even look at this. The state originally was, and that's one of the reasons why the delay. All this stuff should have been before the boards of last year, but the delay was from the state, where they originally said, well, go replace the utility poles, go get right-of-way and all that, and that would have taken a year or two. And in my opinion, it would help a little bit, but not as much as the road diet. The road diet basically will take, instead of 2 lanes in each direction, we'll have 1 lane in each direction with a lane in the middle for the left turns. With that, we were able to do that based on the volumes. Anybody, like right out here on Route 1, and I don't know the numbers offhand, but I'm going to make an approximation of, I'm going to say about 15,000 cars a day on this section. The section, and then a lot of them split at Villa. A lot of them go Villa, and so we'll just say it's almost a 50-50 split. So then you only have 7,500 for the section that we're talking about. And then when they come back on Route 58 and by Moody Avenue, it increases again as they go into Bridgeport. So the one section where this is going to occur, we have almost half the volumes that we normally have, and that's why we're able to look at the road diet. And as I said, by doing that, that opens up the possibility of giving us a lot more room to work with within the right-of-way.
Just going back to the crosswalk question, sorry, I'm going to nitpick on this a little bit. When we're putting in ramps for accessibility to cross a side street that's the sidewalk is running parallel to Kings Highway, there's going to be a marked crosswalk there, correct?
For going on the side street you're talking about? Well, right now, I believe there's going to be Villa Avenue, there's going to be Mason Street, and then Tungus Hill. So that one will have it. Villa should have it, and so Mason Street. And I would say that we're going to push for that one as well. Yes.
You're going to push for it, or it's automatic? I mean, only because to your
can't
point,
be-
it sounds counterintuitive.
Again-
But I'm like, if you're putting an accessibility ramp, I would imagine that you'd want sort of a marked crosswalk somewhere. So, and I know you don't write the state statutes. I'm just trying to get clear on it.
The only way it doesn't get put in is due to sight distance, which we will look at when we do the engineering.
Thank you, Representative Graceffa.
I understand your point, though.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, seeing none, I'm glad we got some nerd talk in tonight. Next item is the bond resolution for the attorney tide gates. Mr. Hurley, you'll be joined by Mr. Schmidt, and Mr. Bodie is on WebEx.
Okay, hello, everyone, again. The Turney Creek Culverts Sewer Siphon and Tide Gate Replacement Project. The proposed project replaces the existing bridge, which is 50 to 75 years old, which is currently in fair to poor condition. It will replace 5 tie gates, which are in poor condition, and the 5 culverts, which 2 of them are disjointed and are in need of replacement. It also provides for an additional sanitary sewer siphon. The replacement of this infrastructure includes some modifications in alignment, but generally maintains the same capacity as existing conditions. And the most significant layout change is the replacement of the culverts, which would be replaced in the limits of the existing bridge. Right now, the 2 culverts are a little bit off to the side because they were done as an afterthought back in the 70s. This will reduce the aerial footprint of the new structure. The replacement tie gates will remain in the same dimensions that currently with the existing structures. There'll be 2 48-inch culverts with self-regulating tie gates and 3 84-inch culverts with the topped or flap hinge flap gates. Those are not the self-regulating. They only go one way. The culverts will be within the proposed head walls, and the pipe, we're going to go with steel-reinforced polyethylene to prevent deterioration in a saltwater environment. The culverts will be anchored with tie-downs with cast-in-place concrete mat to prevent buoyancy. There are also support piles and sheet pile cutoffs to prevent any settlement, scour, or flow underneath the structure. The replacement sewer main, there'll be 3 18-inch PVC pipes. The new siphon lines will provide for expansion of the sewer main and reduce what we call I&I inflow and infiltration and sanitary sewer overflow potential. The project has been designed and is over 90% complete. Basically, it's just the bid documents that have to be done. Permits are in place, and we'd be able to go out to bid pending approval in the next month or 2. Once funding is secure, as I mentioned, the bidding process can commence. The bids would be reviewed, awarded, and as a reminder, we have a $3 million grant, which was approved a couple of months ago. So I'm here to answer any questions on this project.
Thank you, Bill. Any questions from the body? Representative Bateson?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ed Bateson, District 1. Quick question on, so it seems like there's a lot more in here than just tide gates. Is that a fair?
Yes.
Can you just forward us a breakdown of what's in, because I thought tide gates were anywhere from $400,000 to $800,000, and I'm trying to envision this thing in my head. I didn't even know there was a bridge down there. I thought it was just tide gates, but obviously there's something more. So I'll take a drive by and look at that. But I also remember too, didn't we approve money for the siphon project several years ago?
The Sanitary Sewer Commission, the WPCA Commission, did approve, I think it was $488,000 for the sanitary sewer siphon. That's correct.
Okay, so we're adding more money to that? Or did we approve that, or is that just the WPCA was paying for that and we signed off on it?
Yes, that's basically what it is.
Right,
Right now, they're committed to the 488.
Okay, could you just send us a breakout of, how much the siphons are, how much I heard bridge is, how much, how much the tide gates are and how much the culvert are?
A couple of things. Let me just clarify. I had my project mixed up. It's the next one that has the $3 million grant, so I apologize on that one. I just want to make it clear, this one doesn't, we keep on looking for grant money on this one. We do not have any grant money yet on this. The other thing I want to clear up is we did provide backup of the costs of the project, and the sanitary sewer siphon is now up to $860,000. So we will go back to the WPCA and see if they will approve that or not. If they don't, it will be incorporated with the rest of the project. And when you mentioned the design of the culverts and the bridge and the tie gates, we basically are the flap or the self-regulating tie gate, and you're correct. They are probably in the $400,000 to $700,000 range. There are two of those, and then there are two of the regular flap gates. What this project also involves, though, is that basically a bridge replacement. We're going to replace the bridge with three large pipes instead, large culverts.
Now, you call that a bridge, but isn't it basically the three pipes are buried and we just pave over the top of it? But you call it a bridge?
Yeah. Well, no, the bridge is there now, but eventually that's what we'll do. We'll take the top of the bridge, the deck, and the footings associated with it, and put in three pipes and then fill it up. Yeah, fill above it. That's correct.
Okay, so in the siphon now, we're going to wind up with three 18-inch pipes?
That's correct.
And what are we, coming down, we just funded a piece of a 36-inch main, right?
Are you referring to the wetlands project? Yes, that's
Okay,
correct.
so
It's
we're
the
going-
same line, yep.
So 36, and then you're going to go to cross over the creek, you're going to have three 18s.
That's correct.
Okay. And we're adding a siphon.
Well, yeah, from 2 to 3, that's correct.
And we have all the room down there? Because I remember, didn't we get jammed up on the WPCA with the easements on that commercial property? We're all good with all that now?
Yeah, we are. The original, I think it was number 1 or number 2, forgive me the number, Post Road, that was sold and then resold again, and the current developer is not doing anything with the building. He's leaving that alone. So we didn't have to do that stuff that you're mentioning. So that's been a change from previous.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Bateson. Any other questions? Representative Georgiadis?
Drew Georgiadis, District 9. Hi, Bill. So I have a question. This is a lot of money on this that we're approving tonight, and a lot falls to the WPCA and the fund balance. Is there any way the WPCA in a future time can come speak to us, talk to us about how much they have in the fund balance, how they fund it? I know we talk a little bit about that in budget, but and give us like a 20-year outlook or a 25-year outlook, because this is a lot of money, and I know it needs to be approved, but out of the fund balance, out of the fund balance, out of the fund balance. Like, what do you think, Bill?
So
Jared,
if I can
thank
take
you.
that question.
Absolutely.
And I appreciate that. There have been a lot of, a lot of different projects coming through that do include the WPCA. This one in particular, the smaller portion is related to WPCA. And you'll see that in the resolution, the total project is $7.15 million. Only $400,000 of that related to the siphon, correct, Bill?
Yeah, about 10%,
Is
yeah.
WPCA, and it would come out of their fund balance, but it's only $400,000 of the project.
I'm sorry, Jared, didn't Bill just say it's 800 and something thousand now for that?
So that
part of the project?
I think that's what, that's the latest estimate that Bill has. We may have to go back to the WPCA to ask them to approve it. As we were going through the process when it was first approved, they approved it for $400,000. And so the overall cost is not going to change. The the balance of.
So the 7.15 is not going to change?
That's right.
Just their potential contribution to it?
That's right.
Thank
But that's dependent on them approving that additional amount that Bill referred to. But as of right now, what they've approved is 400,000, and that's what we've included in this proposal.
No, Jared, thank you very much. I was asking if the WPCA can put together like a 20-year look ahead and come present to us on the projects that they have. You know, a lot of our infrastructure is World War II era. We're getting a lot of this information. I appreciate your answer, but my question is more about a long-term look ahead.
Sure.
Can we get that on the calendar?
Yeah, and I think I took your question in two parts. One was about the breakout of the project and how that was divided between the town and the WPCA, and I was about to get to your second part, having to do with the finances of the WPCA. You know, when we looked at this, the WPCA did present a 10-year plan that was based on the capital plan, the way it's configured now. They're a good 6 or 7 years out. But the one thing that we're focused on, because it is a capital plan and we update it every year, is what do we have in there this year? And so we're looking at the projects that they have scheduled for this year, next year, and making sure that they have the resources to fund that. And in fact, they do for both the limited amount of money in this project and also the next item on the agenda for the East Trunk Line, that they have the resources are there to fund in this case, would be a cash influx from the WPCA to pay for the 400,000 in this project, and then the next one would be debt service to cover the cost of East Trunk. Like anything else, whether it's WPCA or the town's capital plan, we'll look at it every year and we'll revise it every year, and you know, and make sure that it's within our means to fund it.
And a 20-year look ahead?
As I said, they
It's an
provided
estimate, but-
provided a 10-year financial plan, and you know, for purposes of voting on this item, you know, my opinion is to focus on what the cost of this, what these items are, and
I'm
how
not
much
talking about
they
this, I'm
cost,
just
and then-
asking.
Okay, we'll bring that up. When this is not part of the question tonight. Representative Wackerman. Sorry, Josh. Next.
Karen Wackerman, District 7. This is is in my district. It's actually a few streets away from me, and this has been discussed, I would say, at least 5 or 6 years we've been talking about this. I know that in Sandy, the water overtopped the bridge, the road that's there, and made a lot of us nervous. And I don't know if that was related to this, but it is pretty old, I think, and I would really encourage approval of this. The neighborhood needs to know it's going to work well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Wackerman. Representative Garskoff.
Thank you, Josh Garskoff, District 5. So, question for you, Mr. Hurley. The culverts, the pipe culverts, will they allow for fish passage and sediment transport and natural flow of organisms and things like that? Or are these pipes that are going to stick up and sort of block nature from doing its thing?
As I said before, this project does have all the permits. It's been reviewed by our conservation staff, and matter of fact, they're probably co-sponsoring it, if that makes sense. So conservation staff, Conservation Commission, the DEP have all looked at it and given it the approval. The self-regulating tie gates would work the same way as the other self-regulating tie gates. They do open up and allow fish or wildlife to go through the pipe, but then at a certain time, the gates do close at a certain elevation, and at that time, the fish would have to, wait until the opening.
Sorry, I meant the culvert, the pipe culverts is what I was speaking to.
Those are one-way flap culverts, and no, most likely, unless there is an opportunity where if conservation wants to, or if they have to work on them, they have the opportunity to open them and then like lock them in place for a while. There is that possibility, but in general, the flap gate would only allow water when it's backed up on the, we'll call it the marsh side rather than the creek side. It just opens up one way.
I see. Thank you. That helps.
Thank you, Representative Garskoff. Representative Vergara?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Jill Vergara, District 7. I wanted to second Representative Wackerman's comments. I'm really excited to have this getting done. And I wanted to make sure that that mechanism at the intersection of Riverside and I think it's Shoreham Terrace is included in this because it looks like it's been out of commission for about a year and there have been cones, orange cones, and it's looked pretty terrible. And I just want to make sure that that's taken care of at the same time.
Okay, I'll make a note of it. Thanks.
Thank you, Representative Vergara. Representative Gerber.
Hi, Mr. Hurley. Thanks for taking my question. Bill Gerber, District 2. Question about the tide gates. I'm trying to remember, was there a project to clean out the tide gates and try to get them back in working order? Am I imagining that, or did that happen and you couldn't repair them?
Actually, it happened this afternoon at the Board of Selectmen. We are hiring a consultant to do a complete inventory of all tide gates, not just conservation ones, not just DPW ones. In general, the ones that are self-regulating, the one with the orange balls that allows the salt water to go in intentionally, those are typically, quote, controlled by or maintained by conservation. The one-way flap ones are more of a flood control structure, and those are usually maintained by the DPW. Our consultant will be looking at, I think we had 31 of them, or 31 locations, and so our report will base everything on the condition, the function, and everything of the tide gate. We even have them looking at, and we'll be there when they're looking at them as well. Member of Conservation and Engineering will be there as well. And we're going to look at the dike structure and the pipes that are associated with it, not just the tide gates themselves.
So is there a possibility that the ones that we're bonding, that you won't need to replace them? Or is those definitely the ones that you've determined already have to be replaced?
Are you referring to these ones here today?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we're not going to have them look at these, and we're not going to have them look at the ones you might recall, it was only about 2 years ago, at the Fire Training Center.
Right.
There's all those new ones there.
Right.
There's no point in, yeah.
They're
yeah,
completely ruined.
right.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Representative Gerber. Tide gates going once, twice, 3 times. Okay. Item number 4 is bond resolution East Trust Replacement Project. Bill, you're still here. Jared?
Yep, this is the one that has the $3 million grant that was approved a couple of months ago, and now we're going for the funding for the rest of the project. This is the East Trunk Sewer Line, and as Mr. Bateson had mentioned before, this is basically the area between the Metro Center and the wetlands, which was approved and should be going out to bid very shortly. And then it takes you almost to the siphon. We go all the way to the Post Road. The section that we thought we had to replace due to a developer, but he's not doing the proposed work, and so therefore our line will remain intact there. The East Trunk Sewer Line, though, carries about 60 to 67% of the town's sewer flow to the treatment plant. The sewer was originally constructed, as someone mentioned, just after World War II in 1947 and follows the layout of Ash Creek. There's indications that the pipe has sagged and there's some joints that have opened up along this section. And construction of the new sewer line will significantly reduce I&I inflow and infiltration and sanitary sewer overflows, provide easier maintenance access and better resiliency against the Ash Creek flows and rising sea level. The project proposes to construct the new 36-inch concrete diameter sanitary sewer trunk line. The project's expected to take 14 to 18 months, depending on the notice to proceed and if winter work can be performed. We did provide additional backup on that, and we have the $11 million price includes some inflation contingency. It includes the construction administration and inspection, which was over $700,000, and then we have the actual construction of the project. So I'm here, and Jared's here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions on this item? Representative Gill.
Good evening. Hannah Gill, District 6. Could you just reiterate again what you said about the developer deciding not to, contribute funds and what's going on?
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up, just to be clear. This is a developer that was on the south side of the Post Road, okay? The Metro Center developer will be paying I&I fees to the WPCA to work on the wetlands one, which is going to go out to bid soon. This is the immediate section after that, or in between those. It's from Kennard Street, and it goes along Kenwood. Then it goes Dalewood, Ash, Grassmere, and it goes to the Post Road. And then from there, they're going to line underneath the Post Road. And then the other section, which we thought we had to do a couple of years ago, we don't have to do now, because that developer changed hands, and they're not doing anything with the property.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative Gill. Representative Bateson.
Thank you, Ms. Moderator. Bateson, District 1. Bill, we're not, so the plan is we're not doing the Post Road, we're lining underneath there?
That's correct.
Is there a rationale for that, or we just don't want to open up that box?
I believe there's at least 11 utilities, including that 345 kV line that's there. And so we are just proposing to line the pipe and reduce friction, which would increase the flow for that particular area.
Is that a 36-inch line?
I believe so. John Bodie might still be online. He may know offhand. Actually, I think it says here on the plan 36-inch RCP. Yep.
Okay. Jared, going back to Representative Georgiades' question, I'm pretty sure that when we looked at all this in the capital planning summit, these numbers were figured into the WPCA, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. They were in there for FY24.
But I mean, even everything, the debt service, I'm pretty sure,
Yes.
didn't Joe Davanzo do that spreadsheet that did a cash burn rate? And
Exactly, and his projection, his 10-year projection included not only the two projects that we're talking about tonight, but anything over the next 10 years. And so my point was that with these two projects and anything else to add to that for FY24 is, the WPCA would continue to be operate in a where they still had fund balance. So
none of these numbers are a surprise except for the additional $400,000 for the siphon.
No, I mean, even the 400,000 was in there. It was in there, not what they call a non-capital plan, but it was factored into their budget and into that 10-year analysis.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I would question then, why isn't it on this agenda? Why isn't it listed in the item that they would be paying more because they haven't approved it yet?
So we were in a hurry to get this particular piece on the agenda because we know that we're going to probably have to issue bonds against it, whereas their portion of it, because it's just it'll be cash coming out of their fund balance, we can wait on that. So the project's not starting tomorrow, and we have a little time before the project starts, but we wanted to be sure that we had the authorization so that we could issue the bonds related to it. So we will be coming back to you with a request to, for the $400,000 from their fund balance.
Okay, because you'll be bonding less, correct?
We'll only bond what we think they're going to spend
Right.
over the next year.
So it should
yeah.
be with that other item, 6.7 million.
Right.
Or and whatever it's going to
Exactly.
be.
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
Thank you, Representative Bateson. Representative Pistilli?
Sharon Pistilli, District 3. This is sort of a basic question, so I apologize for it. But in all of this replacement of sewer pipes, have we looked into rehabbing them, like as a potential, like where you put epoxy like inside the line and it's trenchless? Because I've heard that Norwalk and Trumbull are doing that right now. And so did we look into that so that we can, not gulp every time we open a warning and
That's
see
a
the
good
numbers?
question. Matter of fact, yes, we have. That is one of the reasons why this project has taken a little bit longer, is that we had a third-party review the project due to the rising costs even back then. And we have analyzed almost all, actually all possibilities for alternate technologies, and talking to the several engineers, what's proposed is the best for this particular location.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Pistilli. Representative Gale?
All right, and does that have to do with the sagging, with the fact that it's just, the structure is not, it's lacking in integrity? And also is, I don't see the name of the engineering firm. Is this also Tig and Bond?
No, the engineer who did this one was Cardinal Engineering, and then the third-party review was a company called Wright Pierce. We do have other engineers involved as well, though. Ty and Bond is involved in the environmental component of it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Gale. Any other questions? Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Number 5 tonight, the FEMA grant. I guess, Jared, you're going to handle that?
Sure. So this was a grant related to, it's actually reimbursement from FEMA for costs from the Board of Education related to PPE back in 2021. And the grant is coming through the town. It actually passed the Board of Selectmen earlier today, and we went out a little bit out of order, passed the Board of Finance last week, so that we could move on this quicker. But this is $355,370, and the purpose of the grant would be to fund school security purposes.
Thank you, Jared. Any questions? Representative Georgiadis?
Drew Georgiadis, District 9. I see that it was a reimbursement for masks and whatnot. How do you define school security purposes? Will the BOE be able to define what they think qualifies as school security purposes for the use of this money once the town then gives it to the BOE?
I think because of the security issues surrounding this, that they'd be hesitant to talk in any detail about it, not to divulge what the measures are that they're taking for security. And so, it did come up in both the Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen. And for number one, I don't know, and
Well, that was my
number
question.
two,
The BOE will be able to select how they define security purposes.
I would say the BOE in cooperation with the police department.
Thank you, Representative Georgiadis. Representative Carlson?
Laura Carson, District 4. I think the BOA had told us it was for cameras, upgrading their camera system. That when they got, I was told this, we were told this somewhere along the ways, because when they got this grant, that's what they were specifically talking about. I didn't know it was such a secret.
If that's it, maybe it's not anymore.
I think it's,
But-
I just think they want to upgrade their cameras system.
Mr. Moderator, just want to be careful.
We don't talk about
repeatedly-
school
yeah,
security.
Repeatedly cautioned not to do that.
Yeah, this is an ongoing thing all the time. We don't talk about,
I wasn't told personally.
I know, but let's just move
so
on
I
from it.
didn't think- so-
They don't discuss certain items when it comes to security, so the world knows what's going on inside the buildings. It's not. Anybody else? Okay, Jared, thanks. Okay, item number 6, fair rent ordinance. Representative Wackerman?
Good evening, Karen Wackerman, District 7. I'm here with Michelle McCabe and Laura Carson, District 4. And they're two of our sponsors of the Fair Rent Commission ordinance, as well as Margaret Horton, District 9, and Tom Lambert, District 3. So I'm just going to give a quick overview, and Michelle and Laura will add to that. You might have noticed in your materials there was a red line of the ordinance. And what that was a comparison from the original ordinance that was referred to LNA. So if you didn't look at that, you don't have to worry about the red line. So there's been a statute on the books in Connecticut for decades allowing municipalities to establish fair rent commissions. And the change that triggered the need for this is that in, I think it was 2022, the legislature enacted a new statute requiring municipalities with at least 25,000 people to have a fair rent commission. So it's no longer optional, it's required, and the Fair Rent Commission statutes spell out what needs to be in, what the commission needs to do. So our statute, our ordinance rather, really tracks that statute with almost no exception. So basically it needs to be done by each municipality with that population, and also it's supposed to be done by July 1st of this year. So that's the background. So our ordinance establishes the commission. It would have 5 members. We're providing for a member who's a landlord and a member who's a tenant, because we want this to be balanced. A lot of other components of the commission are just like everything else in town, where there will be political party distribution, terms are staggered, things like that. The commission can receive complaints, they can conduct hearings. There's a whole set of conditions that they can look at in deciding whether rent is unreasonable. And the phrase that they're looking for is that it has to be unconscionable. Let's see, where is that? Sorry, I'm trying to find the exact language, but it has to be, the rent has to be really extremely high and unconscionable in order for the commission to be able to take action. So the commission can then order the rent to be lowered. They can order certain, it could be that the situation is there were violations, building code or health code violations that have to be remedied before the rent can be paid. A landlord can't retaliate against a tenant who makes a complaint. And that's pretty much the overview of the ordinance. Laura, did you want to speak?
Yes, I just want to say that that there is nothing in the state legislature now that allows for a cap of the rent increase on landlords. So during COVID, it spiked the rent increases because landlords were pinched from not being able to evict, and they were charging a high rent, and there was a lot of, I guess, complaints. So I think this initiated this need to, create this Fair Rent Commission mandate that over 25,000 people, towns that have over 25,000 people need to create these Fair Rent Commissions. And, they chose to not just do one sweeping piece of legislation that mandates everybody, every town has to do this. They did it with 25,000 people or more, and it's actually giving each town that fits into that category local control to create their own commissions and see fit to what they want to do. And we, on this commission, we did reach out to you Republicans, but you didn't get involved. And so we're trying to be fair and equitable to both sides. We did insist that of the 5 members, one has to be a landlord, one has to be a tenant. And I did reach out to someone on a town council in Southington, Connecticut, where they passed this 9-0 with the 6-3 Republican majority, all 9 passed it. And they said that in their town, they have a large population of people that own mobile homes. But the problem is they own the mobile home, but not the property underneath. And their rents were getting exorbitant because companies are coming in and charging them for this property right. So they were getting a lot of complaints. So they felt the need in that town to pass this ordinance to give them an opportunity to air their grievances. And again, it has to be egregious. It's not about just a small amount of things. And from what I've learned, it's not like these commissions are getting swamped with complaints all over the place. So it just gives tenants the ability to air this grievance where they didn't have this before. So I hopefully hope that you all join us in voting for this. It is mandated by Hartford, and I think Fairfield wouldn't look nice upon us if we didn't vote for this particular ordinance. Thank you.
Good evening. Just a few words on process. We made an effort to look at Fair Rent Commission ordinances from a range of towns that are similar to ours, and we engaged Mark Barnard in the process, and he was incredibly helpful, and we made some adjustments based on his input. So we tried to be exhaustive. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, this was brought up, I think at LNA, but I'm not positive, that one of the towns that had sort of the higher numbers of complaints was about 8 in a year, and that was pretty uncommon for the amount of matters brought before the Fair Rent Commission in that town.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning Mark Barnhart. He was a big help with this. He's been getting educated about this, and actually his office will probably be administering this because there will be some staffing needs to support the commission. We're fine with any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the body? Representative Astorita.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ken Astorita, District 10. So my first question is, isn't there like already a state entity that tenants can go to if they have complaints about their landlord?
There currently isn't any statute that supports a tenant being able to go directly to the courts, for example, to get some sort of relief for some sort of excessive rent increase.
So there's no agency. So a tenant's only option right out of the gate is you'd have to take the landlord to court. Is that what I'm understanding?
I actually don't think that there's any law that would support a tenant taking a landlord to court. In other words, there's no state law that says a landlord isn't, like the language that's in here for a Fair Rent Commission is not state law.
Right.
So no, they wouldn't be able to go to court currently if, for example, they were living in a place and the rent was tripled. They would either have to pay or leave or not pay.
Because this is what doesn't make sense to me. And again, I could be ignorant of it, but you hear issues about negligent landlords neglecting their properties all the time. So I thought there had to already be some sort of a mechanism in place for tenants of those landlords to address whatever issues they have. But you guys are telling me there's no way that they can do anything.
I think for things like that or health code violations, there'd be local complaints by the tenant to those particular
Okay.
departments. I don't believe there's any state statute governing it, but they would, if it's something like a negligent landlord, you'd use a city or town ordinance and that department to take action.
Okay. So then my other question is, in section 3, you list the circumstances. Where did those come from? Because I guess my one question in particular is, number 9, it says the income of the petitioner, and I'm just trying to understand how that would be relevant to determining whether somebody's rent is fair or not.
Well, this was right out of the statute, so these are the things that the statute says need to be considered by the
So
commission.
that language is in the statute?
Yeah,
Okay.
and these are just all the different possible things to look at. So it's not meant that you have to, fit into all of these, but
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Astria. Representative McCormick.
Karen McCormick, District 2. Through you, Mr. Moderator, to any one of the co-sponsors, how is unconscionable defined in the statute?
it isn't defined in the statute.
I didn't see it either.
And it's not defined in other parts of the law, too, I believe.
That presents an issue, of course. I understand that we're under the requirement of the state statute to create this commission, and I take issue with that because I believe that the free market should dictate whether or not a rent that's being charged by a landlord is a market rate or not. Presumably, if a landlord increases the rent to such an extent that it's not affordable for, or not a market rate for what the landlord is offering, then the market will dictate to the landlord whether or not that rent can be charged going forward. So while I understand that we're under the auspices of the state legislature and we have to create this commission, we don't have a choice about that, I have a question as to whether or not the commission considered determining, specifically in section 1B, and beyond, the findings of the commission, that should be determined by more than a simple majority of the number of members of the commission. Did you folks consider that in fashioning the language here? There were a few things that you said, so I'm going to try to remember them in order. So I believe in terms of the question about harsh and/or unconscionable, when the ordinance in Section 3 goes on to instruct the commission to consider certain circumstances, I believe that those are the check boxes to gauge whether or not the action of the landlord is beyond what is reasonable. And so the commission would go through each of these points and make an assessment. Or also, the commission is given the authority to request and conduct reports so that the commission is aware of market forces, et cetera, and isn't just sort of acting without additional information. And
Supermajority.
yeah.
We did talk about the supermajority issue. There's only one town in Connecticut so far that has enacted an ordinance with that requirement that it has to be a vote of a supermajority of the Fair Rent Commission to take action. And our committee was not in favor of that. It isn't required by the statute. Most of our towns and boards and commissions in town don't have that requirement, so there's no reason to do that, and we just didn't want to do that. We saw no point.
It also should be stated that there is an opportunity for the decision of the commission to be appealed. So this body doesn't necessarily make the absolute and final ruling that there is opportunity to, in fact, go to court if there is an issue with the decision that's made. Through you, Mr. Moderator, to Representative Wackerman, what exactly is the definition of a supermajority?
Well, you asked about that, didn't you?
I didn't use the term supermajority.
Oh,
You did.
what did you say?
More than a simple majority.
Well, simple would be just one more than half, and supermajority would be more than that, would have to pass. So like two more than half. You know, it's defined usually in any agreement I do. It's supermajority is defined, but it means more than just a simple one person extra.
So out of 5 members on this board or commission, how many would be a simple majority? 3?
3.
And how many would be, you term it supermajority? 4?
Well, we're also looking at quorums. If you have a quorum, then it could be a different number because you just have to have more than half voting in favor of the action. So if all 5 people are there for the vote, I don't know. It would supermajority would be whatever people say it is in the ordinance. There's no, standard number for supermajority, but it would be more than 3.
And in Stratford, which is the town you're referring to that enacted a ordinance that includes more than a simple majority, they said 2/3 of the members, correct?
I don't know exactly. I forget from the article I read.
Okay. Going back to Representative Astorita's point, and to some extent touching on Representative McCabe's point, you indicated that there's check boxes pursuant to this section 3, how to determine excessive rent. You said that there's going to be check boxes and that the commission will go down their checklist and determine of the, let's say, 13 items that are listed here, which ones are present in any given situation. Was that what you said? No, I didn't say it. I mean, I said it, but it was not in terms of being instructive as to how the commission is actually going to enact the ordinance. Rather, that the ordinance itself gives the commission a number of different measures by which to find a tenant or a landlord as charging excessive rent. And so that is what is included in 1 through 13 in the ordinance. Okay, so for example, number 9, the income of the petitioner and the availability of accommodations. If a particular tenant in the town of Fairfield is renting, let's say, a beachfront property, and they lose their job, and they no longer have the income to support a $10,000 or $20,000 a month rent, and there really aren't available accommodations for them, given the size of the numbers that we're talking about in that situation, the concern that I have is that that could be determined to be something that's unconscionable. This poor person lost their job, they can't afford their $10,000 or $20,000 a month rent, and therefore they are permitted some kind of relief under this statute and under this ordinance. And that, to me, needs to be decided by more than just a bare majority. That isn't a circumstance that's covered by this ordinance. This ordinance would be somebody is renting a beachfront property and the landlord decides that they're going to triple the rent because, and it becomes therefore unaffordable. There is no necessarily a justification for the tripling of the rent. And so the tenant can, if they so choose, go before the Fair Rent Commission and make their case. And then the Fair Rent Commission could tell them that they think it's fair and that's what the market will bear and that there are other properties that in town they can afford and they'll make a determination. And then if after all that happens and the Fair Rent Commission, let's say, rules in favor of the tenant, the landlord can go to court and make their case there. So there is recourse in the event that something is not justified by the evidence. But the circumstance that you described is not what this commission is set up to do.
I do want to point out, and I know you may have more questions, but this is designed to, I think there's concern about abuse of this commission from some of the questions. And we're trying to make this, to try to make that, mitigate that risk by having a balance of parties, having a landlord and a tenant there, and having all these conditions. The other thing I just want to mention is this is what's in the statute. So to the extent you guys, are uncomfortable with it, anybody is, you should talk to your state reps, because this is, we can't really, we're doing what the statute says. So, but that doesn't mean I don't want to hear your questions. I just wanted to point that out.
Understood that you're doing what the statute requires. And I guess that's the problem that I have with the ordinance, the way it's written. It's required to track the language that's been dictated to us from Hartford, yet, I would just challenge the claim that this does not apply in the situation that I just laid out, because the precise language of this ordinance does say, in determining whether a rental charge or a proposed increase in rental charge is so excessive. So it does apply in a situation where somebody loses their job and the rent is too high given their income. That is absolutely something that can be taken into account by this commission. And because of that, and because this language is being dictated by Hartford, I would implore this body to require that there's more than a simple majority in order to make a finding that a rental charge is either excessive, unconscionable, or egregious. And I would like to point out that I have been personally involved in cases involving fair rent, and I've witnessed essentially what I would describe as legalized extortion against landlords in the state. And I take issue with this because I do think, use the example, there's only been eight cases in other towns. 830G wasn't really utilized by developers until a few years ago, and now we're inundated. When people hear that they have a body to go to in the town of Fairfield to complain about essentially what one would call fair market rents, a landlord shouldn't have to defend themselves. They shouldn't have to be subject to subpoenas. This commission's going to have subpoena power over people. That you're taking rights away from people. They're required to come before a commission and defend their name, defend their reputation and their character in a town, because they're being accused of being a slumlord or a excessively greedy landlord, because that's what this is going to label those people as, being greedy and taking advantage of people. And to me, that's
Point
just
of order, Mr. Moderator. Can we get back to the ordinance, please? Thank you.
Yeah,
We're on the ordinance, but you've had a lot of time, Representative McCormick, so let's get to your next question, please.
I'll just close with the fact that this is a very, very serious situation. It's a very, very serious, in my opinion, taking of rights away from landlords. And if we're going to have to do it because Hartford's dictating that, and because our representatives, quite frankly, won't listen to us when we call them, then we need to make sure that we put...
That's an incorrect point of order, Mr. Moderator.
We need to make sure that we put provisions in
order,
place
Mr.
to
Moderator.
protect the rights of
Okay,
landlords.
thank you, Representative McCormick. Representative Bateson.
Ed Bateson, District 1. Thank you, Representative McCormick. See, this is why I hire lawyers. You make how I feel sound so much better. Thank you for what you said. As you guys know, I hate this ordinance. I just do. In the interest of full disclosure, I'm a landlord. I've been a landlord for 30 years. What Karen said is absolutely spot on. To me, this is another level of government. I mean, I pride myself on the way I operate my rental properties. If there's issues, I deal with them. I know where this is going. It's going to be abused. I'm not going to get a phone call now. I'm going to get a letter from the Fair Rent Commission that I have to appear. And now I'm not collecting rent because I'm assuming that's going to be suspended. I've seen the way this is operated in Hamden. I own rental property in Hamden. They have a Fair Rent Commission. I mean, their commission up there, I mean, I've seen their decisions, notice to quit, thrown out. I mean, Representative McCormick's right. I mean, as a landlord, my rights are going to be taken away. Now, I understand that this is Hartford's prerogative, but I do think you should consider the supermajority. because just that one vote margin is just, I just don't think it's enough to protect the rights of the landlord. And you got to, you know, and I object to the way that part of this was framed that, you know, rents went up during the pandemic to make up for losses or something like that. No, the market set the rate. Everyone left New York City. There was no rental around here. I mean, I was shocked when I went out to price my properties. I'm like, what? I'm like, are you kidding me? How did this go from 2,000 to 2,400 in a matter of months? It's because of supply and demand. God bless America. That's the way it goes. So, I mean, I wouldn't call that upset, you know, unconscionable. That's just the way the market went. Another thing I object to in here is it says other alleged violations of law regarding housing. I can't tell you how horrible it was to try and manage rental properties during the pandemic. I had a tenant lost a washing machine. I could not find one. That's a violation of housing. I mean, now, you guys, I understand where Hartford's, no, I don't understand what Hartford does. But I will say that when they enact
Point
these
of order,
laws,
Mr. Moderator, what's the question?
there's no question. I'm debating the merits of the ordinance.
Don't we debate at the meeting and not the committee meeting? I thought.
Okay, so you don't want to hear what I have to say? That's fine. I'm a no vote.
Can I respond?
Certainly. I didn't tell you to stop talking, so.
Yeah, it's up to the moderator. I'm obviously, so.
Okay.
Representative McCabe's going to respond to what he said already, if that's okay.
That's fine.
Thank you. First, I just want to say that I think we're making a lot of assumptions that the commission is only going to side with a tenant versus a landlord. I think the intent is that it's meant to be, you know, a fair and equitable process. And not all landlords are good landlords. I'm sure that you would agree that there are bad actors in all things, and that, you know, part of what we try to do is to protect the most vulnerable among us. And I believe the intent of this is to give, if a landlord raises a rent and somebody doesn't pay, they can evict them. They have some tools to ensure that people do what their end of the deal is and pay their rent. And this commission is to assist the tenant that doesn't have those kinds of protections for the bad actors, not for the landlords like you that are doing things the right way. And it's an opportunity for them, including, like I said, the most vulnerable among us, like seniors or disabled people. This is to protect them and to give them an opportunity to protest something that is unfair. And I think that even with a simple majority, again, having a landlord and a tenant on that commission will give the fairness that's required to be able to hear and give a tenant an opportunity to have their voices heard. So I fully appreciate the concern. I fully appreciate the fear of abuse, but this Fair Rent Commission has been in play for a long time, and it's our understanding that it hasn't seen widespread abuse, but we can certainly make sure that that's the case. And then the last thing I want to say is that I think that given the fact that there isn't anything to protect tenants at this moment, that we've been given an opportunity as a town to address the situation and to actually not have Hartford be overly dictatorial on how we do it. It's our Fair Rent Commission that we get to put the people on it that we think are appropriate, and we get to appoint them. So I just wanted to say that it's, I think, probably not going to end up being as egregious as you may think.
I understand your position and where you're coming from. I get what you're saying. Unfortunately, I have to look at the negative side of what's going to happen. And I'd like to believe you. I'd like to believe that the state's intentions were good. I'd like to believe that the Fair Rent Commission's intentions are going to be good. But this is going to be abused. I mean, it just is. I I can, with 100% certainty, I can envision people saying, "Oh, I'm not going to pay rent because of this." And, so as a landlord, where do I go now? I can't take retribution on, is sending them a notice to quit and starting an eviction process because they're not paying rent, is that considered retaliation? There's a lot of questions here that I'm just uncomfortable with. And, to Representative McCormick's point, the intention of 830G was noble. And look where that got us. So I don't believe any of that stuff that the intent is good. The intent is good, but the application is just, it's going to go sideways.
Can I just ask a question? Ed, you said you have properties in Hamden and you've dealt with Hamden's Fair Rent Commission.
Yes.
Has it been really hard for you? Can you
Oh,
expand?
no. I just follow their minutes. I've never had an issue.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, did you have anything you could tell us?
No,
Oh,
I've
okay.
never been in front of
Oh,
their commission. I just,
And you have properties in Hamden?
Yeah.
So you haven't had an issue with anybody?
No, it's relatively new.
So I'm just saying, so it's relatively new, so you haven't had anything yet?
But I do follow the minutes up there, and I see,
But,
as a landlord, you're like, whoa.
No.
Look what's going on
Right.
here.
I'm
Like,
just-
oh,
Well, how about, on this commission, you may have 3 landlords that decide to take part in this commission. So there, you could have that, and you'll feel better about that. I don't know.
You're trying to sell it to me, but I'm
No,
not
I don't
buying
have to
it.
sell it. This is something that's mandated. I didn't come up with this to do this
I know it's
because it came from
mandated.
my
State
brain.
mandates a lot of stuff. Doesn't mean
Right.
it's good.
But then, so what do you do? So we just decide not to listen anymore to,
No, to Representative McCormick's thing, we go to the supermajority. At least that offers some protection that it's going to be 4 out of 5. Or, quite frankly, I'm not even a fan of these. I like holding elected people accountable. I designate this to the Board of Selectmen. I'm just throwing that out there. So in other words, if this commission goes off the rails and starts granting all these things, you can vote them out of office.
All right, we had the term off the rails. Representative Iacona.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I apologize. I don't know how to use this iPad to see the red line, but when we talked about the landlord-tenant change to make it, to give yourself a little bit of wiggle room, was that put in, or you decide? Okay. As a preference, right. Okay. All right, cool. Thank you for that. And then someone else mentioned, take it up with your state representative. It was my understanding that Representative Leeper voted against this in Hartford. Was that a misunderstanding?
I asked her that. She didn't have enough information, she said, so she didn't vote on the merits. That's what she told me. That's all I heard.
Okay, so she was on record then as a no. So when I looked this up, Representative Leeper voted no on this. Okay, thank you. And just to add my 2 cents in, I gave it at LNA, but I do also feel very strongly that it should be a 2/3 vote. And I, again, align that with our ZBA board. You're going in front of somebody and asking for an exception to a rule. You do an exception to a rule at this body. And it takes a 2/3 majority to do that. It's 2/3 there, and it makes a lot of sense to me if you are trying to overturn something that someone has instituted, that should take a 2/3 vote to do it. It's a standing practice, really, on so many boards and commissions. So I really do hope that would be a consideration if an amendment is put forward to change this ordinance, and to allow for that 2/3, that would receive a positive vote of the body. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative Iacona. And just to be clear to everybody here, we're not voting on this until June 26th, okay? So let's not get hot and bothered under the collar tonight. Representative Pistilli.
Sharon Pistilli, District 3. I am a former landlord of one unit, not quite the same as Mr. Bateson, but so my question is, if we were to include the 2/3 majority, would it make sense to change the number of people on the commission? Like instead of 5, make it 7? Like that's one consideration, one question.
We actually originally had 7. The concern was the challenge that we have in getting people to get on a board or a commission, and so we worried that we wouldn't be able to staff it appropriately if
Okay.
we were to do that.
And then, this is very basic, like, I mean, I read the ordinance, but conceptually, the Fair Rent Commission, if a lease has been executed, they can overrule an executed lease?
No. What it says is that, and actually this is an opportunity to correct or to add more information. If a tenant brings a concern before the commission about an excessive increase in rent, it's an increase in rent that triggers this whole process, not a job loss, just an increase. So a lease has been signed, the landlord wants an increase, then what it says is that the tenant's liability shall be for the amount of the last rent prior to the increase complained of. They still have to pay rent, they just don't have to pay the increase until a decision is made by the commission.
But if the lease has been executed,
I don't think a lease would have been executed. This would be a tenant being informed, and then they complain. If they sign a lease agreeing to pay something and then say, I don't agree to pay it, I think that's a completely different situation that this commission would not have any ability to rule on. They signed a legally binding document saying they would pay the increased rent and then change their mind. I don't think that's what this commission's set up to do.
okay, so the parties have already agreed to something. It's if they say, okay, if you renew, this lease is going to go up 20%, even though the units around us are only going up 10%, then there's an issue. So it's not overriding an already legally executed document.
I think I read it as allowing, if there is a lease and there's, regular rent being paid, but a bunch of these factors exist. Say they've been leasing for 6 months and then the toilet doesn't flush and other things happen. I read it as allowing them to go to the commission. I mean, we're interpreting a statute that, just like you all are, but that's what I read.
Michelle is referring to just the increased part of the complaint. If someone has complaints about conditions or violations, that's another set of circumstances.
But right now, that would be health department, right? Yeah. Okay. And then, and change in income alone, like in COVID, when there was a rent freeze or, a moratorium, income alone is not going to be enough to have someone come before this board, right? So the beachfront property example, I lost my $2.3 million a year job. That alone is not enough to come before the commission then, right?
I would say so. That's, they're supposed to look at all these factors. I think if a commission lowered the rent based on that, it would probably go right to court on appeal and they would lose. But, so it's discretionary. The commission has discretion looking at all these different factors. But I don't think that this at all contemplates that scenario.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Representative Pistilli. Representative Zesma?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So I just wanted to start out by, I think everyone in this room understands this, but this is more for public edification. So every ordinance, and since we are the majority party, we invite the minority party to participate in the working group. And I'm sorry in this case that request was, or offer was turned down. So these concerns, I hear them, I understand, there's passion, there's anger, but I wish these people were doing the work. Okay, because otherwise it's not a good look for this body. It's a second ordinance where this has happened, and now those who are doing the work come under, inquisition-style questioning. So I want to make sure everybody understands there's a reason there's only one party sitting up there. Number two, will the approval process for these commissioners include the RTM?
Yes.
Okay, I just want questions asked and answered for public understanding. Right. So
We made sure that the RTM was included.
Thank you. So 4C, the commission or municipal staff may, to the extent practicable, encourage the parties to the complaint to reach a mutually satisfactory resolution. So in fact, there is a great deal of emphasis on not having the commissioners make these decisions. Okay.
Yes.
I would also say that this is market-based. It's market-based in the same way that assessments and appraisals are in the real estate market. We're trying to determine for both the landlord's benefit and the tenant's benefit what the market is. How else can a dispute be resolved? As Representative Bateson mentioned, is there precedent in this state that you can bring forward where landlords are being abused? I mean, I don't want hearsay to be what dictates, our decision about this commission.
I don't think I understand the question.
Representative Bateson talked about abuse of landlords. Is there precedent or evidence in this state where that has happened that we could consider?
I don't know of any, widespread evidence of that.
Okay. I mean, I would invite my colleagues to bring that forward. And finally, let me just say 830G is for municipalities who ignore the need for affordable housing, okay? So that's the whole purpose of it, is if we're not, this is also, by the way, in my mind, at some point you want to be able to attract people who can afford to live here and to stabilize a market that allows us to flourish and grow. I think that's, the correct way to go about it. And I would hope that if you need to increase, I know you're concerned about that, if you feel you need to increase the size of the commission, that if that were to ameliorate some concerns or issues, that might be considered.
Thank you. I did want to mention, too, that the commission is authorized to ask for studies to be done to learn what the market rates are in the town. So they wouldn't be working in a vacuum in terms of market price.
Thank you. So landlords can't be sandbagged by, inaccurate information. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Zesma. Who would be paying for those studies? Does this commission have a budget?
That's what we've talked to Mr. Barnhart about that, and they will need to have a budget because they might even need half a person in their staff. I don't know. The hope would be that a lot of this could just be dealt with by staff, as you pointed out, Representative Zesma, just with informal conversations, but they will need some support.
Have you considered alternates as well? Like the Historic District Commission has alternates, so if there's not enough to have the meeting, there are available people to fill those?
We have 2 alternates in the...
Thank you.
Yeah.
Representative Georgiadis.
Through Georgiadis, I want to give a shout out to tenants. I have 4 sons. One had the broken refrigerator for 4 months, no help. One had a wall that was damp and full of black mold. Took 5 months to resolve. So Mr. Bason's comment that it will be 100% abused, I think 100% is probably an overreach, and hopefully both sides will be treated fairly. I also want to point out that the need or the request for a greater than majority, 3 out of 5 is 60%, so that's greater than a simple majority. And if you had 4 out of 5 people in the commission, that would be 80%, which is a bit extreme. So please keep the percentages in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Georgiadis. Representative Barahona.
Representative Barahona, District 5. Thank you for your work on this. I have a question with the fair market rent that Representative Zesma was speaking about. I mean, I benchmark all the time for affordable housing purposes what the market rate is. So is it really... And obviously, Mr. Bateson, when he raised his rent to $2,400, you had some benchmarking data, correct? That said that the market supports that. So there must be tools that we don't have to pay for a study, right? That I imagine that this commission would be looking at that example right there would not be egregious because the market rate would support the increase of the 2,400 in that case, correct? So
Yeah.
do we really think a whole lot of studies need to be done? I mean, there's a lot of evidence out there about what the Fairfield County market is that I assume this body would be using.
That's a good point. I'm not familiar with that, but I'm sure there's free, free things they can use, and I'm sure that that would be fine. There's just that authorization in case it's needed. But.
Thank you, Representative Barahona. Representative Astorita.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ken Astorita, District 10. So I've heard a lot of different things going on here. One, I don't think Mr. Bateson said that this would be 100% abused. I think he said that there would be cases where it's abused. I served on the board of directors at the Southport Woods condos for 4 years, and I can tell you that you do have cases where things similar to this get abused. And to the majority leader's statement, does anyone have any cases? Well, we had a case with an individual who, because this person explicitly knew how to exploit the system of the Human Rights Commission, was able to get out of paying rent for a number of months. So I have personally seen where these types of things do get abused. Now, Representative Bastilli said a lot of great things which were perfectly logical and made a lot of sense. But my only issue is language like this is open to interpretation, and anybody can interpret things differently in a given moment in time. Now, you've got the words egregious and unconscionable in here, which again makes sense. But if a case is egregious and unconscionable, that to me says everybody with a brain understands that there's a problem here. So to me, there shouldn't be an issue getting 4 out of 5 to agree in a case like that to address an issue. 3 to 2 tells me that, people they could go either way, right? But if it's egregious and unconscionable, 4 out of 5 people should be able to agree that there's a problem and to address it. So as I stand now, and again, I don't like these kind of things because I do think they tend to get abused in the long run, but I can't support something where it's only 3-2. If you want somebody like me to get on board and support this, I need to see something in place where, it's either 4 out of 5 or 2. Representative Pastilles, you're adding more people to the commission that's what I got to say.
Thank you, Representative Astorita. Representative Gerber.
Hey, Bill Gerber, District 2. Thanks for your work on this. One maybe addressed in here. I couldn't find it. The definition of a landlord. A lot of these buildings might be owned by LLCs with silent partners. Is there a way to ensure that those people, that we wouldn't have multiple landlords, direct or indirect, on the board, on the commission?
Well, any member of the commission has to be a voting resident of Fairfield, a registered voter. Did you mean you're worried about
What I mean is a registered voter of Fairfield who has major investments in LLCs that own real estate, as opposed to someone who's a known landlord whose name, is on a piece of paper. You might want to.
they have to be a landlord of residential property, but we didn't say, the value.
You can try to find out who the landlords are in a lot of these buildings, and you'll probably won't be able to find out. It's not so easy sometimes.
Are you asking about the
For the commission,
appointed?
constitution of the commission, you might want to make sure that it's not just people who are the sole owners of properties, but if it's through an LLC that has silent partners, you would not necessarily want those people, more than one person. If they're the landlord that's on the commission, you wouldn't want multiple people with big residential investment interests on the commission. And you could just get them to sign something, I guess. Another question, or just a comment, I guess, is I think it's already been addressed, but, Section 3A is really all about, similar, rates for similar types of apartments or houses. So essentially, that is the market. So if you're really looking at something that's outsized, like egregious change versus the market. So, but I do have a question about the market, something that was just mentioned about having, I think it was Representative Barahona, but do we know if these types of problems are typically with units that are that go through sort of formal channels for rentals, or the units with these types of problems, are they sort of informal channels that you wouldn't necessarily know, you wouldn't necessarily see on a real estate broker sort of system?
I don't really know. I'm sorry Mr. Barnhart isn't here. I was late inviting him, and hopefully he can come next month. He has been attending some programs on this, and he may know from other towns what the case is, but I don't know.
And some people go month to month, right? So this would actually be included, a month to month, right? My last question is, if you own a property, and since we're talking about the market here, the market can change if you renovate your unit, right? So if you gut it and make it twice as nice, and you're going to charge twice as much, nothing's stopping you from doing that. You can do with your property whatever you want, right? Okay, thanks. Thanks.
Thank you, Representative Garber. Representative Lambert, I think you're online with us with a question.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Tom Lambert, District 3. I just had a comment on some of the other comments and observations that were made so far. I'm one of the co-sponsors, and first of all, I want to use my time to thank not only Mr. Barnhart, but also Representatives Wackerman, McCabe, Horton, and Carson for their hard work on this, and to thank them for the repeated follow-up meetings that we had to put together what I think is a really good ordinance that reflects what's required in state statute. I'm in favor of this ordinance. Obviously, I'm a co-sponsor, and I think some of the concerns that have been put forward tonight have been addressed by the co-sponsors. I just had a comment on Representative Astorita's observation about the supermajority and the terminology. I think that's used, unconscionable, I think is itself the safeguard and the example as to why we don't need a supermajority or two-thirds majority or anything other than a bare majority. Because if we had a standard that was a lower standard, such as a reasonableness standard, you might get people who disagree more frequently as to what is or isn't reasonable. But when you have a standard that's heightened, that's what's conscionable or unconscionable, I think that that's the protection that you have as to what we can all agree rises to that level of conscionability or unconscionability. So I think that that's the reason why having a bare majority to make decisions on this actually works in favor of making this an effective use of an ordinance and a commission. So I think that the language there is in and of itself a good safeguard, but also the composition of the committee itself and the way that's being balanced in terms of representing both the interests of landlords and tenants, I think mitigates a lot of the concerns that folks have. So these are members who I think aren't going to be coming out of nowhere, and aren't going to be, if this RTM does its job, hijacking what landlords can and can't do. So I think that there are sufficient safeguards in place. I think that the need for affordable housing is far greater than the what ifs and the remote possibilities that could happen. So I'm in favor of this, and I hope that the version that's put forward before this body is the version that can pass, because I think it's sorely needed, not only in this town, but in the state in general.
Thank you, Representative Lambert. Attorney Baldwin, I think you've had your hand raised for a little bit behind me.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to touch upon some of the things that were mentioned tonight and maybe clarify a few things, starting at the beginning. Um, in fact, for what it's worth, the under the prior statute, for those municipalities that did not have a fair rent commission, tenants were able to take their landlord to court. But obviously, this does away with that now. A supermajority would, by conventional definition, be two-thirds, three-fourths, or four-fifths for a commission comprised of 5 members. And I also want to clarify that the statement was made that this only applies to rental increases for existing landlord-tenant relationships. In fact, this would also apply to any new offer of a rent to a new proposed tenant. So I just wanted to touch upon those 3 items that I think deserve some clarification.
Thank you, Jim.
You're welcome.
Any other questions on this tonight, or Representative Steele?
Jeff Steele, District 2. So there's obviously a couple of different views on the word egregious and unconscionable, and that's what Representative Astorita brought up. So as much as we've all talked about this, I don't know if I've heard from the three of you as to whether you'd be willing to expand this to a quote-unquote supermajority or 4 out of 5 or all the numbers that Attorney Baldwin just mentioned. Is that something you'd be willing to think about?
We did discuss it already, and we weren't in favor of it, but we can discuss it again, but we don't see a need for it. I think what Representative Lambert just said is completely true. The unconscionable standard, I mean, that's a legal standard that we see all the time, and it's a very high bar to be unconscionable, and it's a balanced committee, so I personally don't see a need, but we haven't discussed it since this meeting, so, we'll see. But
yeah, I just didn't know there was a specific defined unconscionable level, and if there is, I didn't know that.
Well, I don't know if there's a written definition, but it's, shocking, hard to believe it's true. It's that kind of level.
Again, it is somewhat based on everyone's individual opinion or perspective. That's
well,
where
there are many
it just
court
gets back
cases.
to what we were talking about, and that therefore I kind of disagree with what was mentioned earlier. I think a supermajority would address that for that very reason. Now, also what Attorney Baldwin just brought up, this is, again, for just increases, not for new rent for new places. Well, he said it was both, but I've heard that it's only for new increases. Do they?
Well, we can certainly look into what Attorney Baldwin has said, and then we will bring it to the full body in June.
Thank you, Representative Steele. Representative Pastilli?
Sharon Pastilli, District 3. I think that between the debate that we've seen on this ordinance and the debate that we've seen on the noise ordinance, what we'd really like is for Democrats and Republicans to come together and co-sponsor ordinances so that instead of having a long meeting like this, we can actually meet at the table and work together. That's just a statement that I'd like to make about the body.
Thank you, Representative Pastilli. Thank you, ladies. Thank you for your work. Item number 7, noise ordinance. Representative Vergara. She's not a sponsor of the bill of the.
I can recall one time when we did recovery of costs, and we did allow the resident who was instrumental in facilitating a lot of the language to join us, I believe. But if you, it's your call, Mr. Moderator.
I don't recall that personally, but
That was Chuck Abercrombie.
you're on your own. Sorry. And if you want someone else to sit up there with you, one of the other sponsors, then.
Well, Jill Vergara from District 7. I'm one of the co-sponsors for the revisions to the noise ordinance. The other co-sponsors are Representative Georgiadis, Representative Galdenzi, and Representative Graceffa, and Representative Wolk. I wanted to introduce Ms. Israel because she did so much of the work and has been working on this for years. I think that she worked with Representative Perugini when he served on this body, and she hired a consultant, paid that consultant quite a bit of money to do a lot of research, which helped to produce a lot of these revisions. So I'm grateful that she invested that money, because I think it's helped to get to a point where we're making improvements to an ordinance that wasn't being enforced. And so that's one of the biggest reasons why we really have to revise this ordinance. The other reason is that it's not compliant with our state statutes. So that's another reason why we really have to revise this ordinance. I understand that there's debates to be had about some of the details of it, but I really do think that much of this revision is necessary. And the other reason why I think it would be very helpful to revise the ordinance and make it so that we can enforce it is to get that money. Because right now, when there are any enforcement actions, which aren't very many, because with hundreds of complaints, we only have a handful of infractions made, it would help us to get some of that revenue from the fines as well, rather than the state. And I would appreciate that, as well as slapping people with fines rather than using criminal statutes like breach of peace, which that's why we don't have very many infractions being made, because it's really onerous and they're criminal statutes. So it's a very different standard than a town ordinance. The most significant changes that we've made are the addition of daytime hours, the new plainly audible standard, the specific prohibitions in section 78.8, and the variance procedures. So in a little, I was gonna go over each of those things to describe them, because I realized there was some misunderstanding about some of the, especially with plainly audible. And I also want to, I know it's been kind of like a confusing process since I presented this in March and got a lot of good questions, and wanted to take it back to committee to try to address a lot of those questions. And I think that we did, and we can continue to do that, because I'm looking forward to engaging in some questions and answers. But so I'll outline all of those changes for each of those steps when I brought it back to LNA, and then bringing it here to you today. For the daytime hours, we have to add the daytime protections to be in line with state requirements. We're the only town in Connecticut with a local noise ordinance lacking daytime hours. In section 78.2, daytime hours are defined as the hours between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. Monday through Friday, and the hours between 8 p.m. and 10 p.m. Saturday, Sunday, and during any state or national holiday. Because of the extension of protections into the daytime hours, we had to expand the exclusions listed in 78.7. The activities that are excluded from the noise ordinance that aren't excluded in our current ordinance, so this is only the items that we added because exclusions already exist. The exclusions that we added include agricultural activities. These are all things completely excluded from the ordinance. The unamplified human voice, public school construction, noise created by DPW and WPCA. I know that people have asked whether snow removals is included. It's already included in the ordinance as an exclusion. Garbage collection during the daytime hours, fireworks by the town and fireworks by others who have received permits from the town completed by 10:30. That time restriction doesn't apply to the town's 4th of July celebration, but it does apply to any resident who's gotten a permit, and public demonstrations. I also want to note that all public celebrations sanctioned by the state or the town are already excluded. This would include all school-sponsored events and all events permitted by the town and open to the public. So that was the daytime hours. And the other large thing changed is the new plainly audible standard. When we discussed it before, it was clear that there was a misunderstanding of what the plainly audible applies to. It's only to noise produced by sound production devices. So it's really only music. And because of some input in LNA about instruments, we've taken that out of the definition of sound production devices. And we also we tried to clarify that in the chart and throughout the language that it really only applies to basically music. The one thing that isn't music that's included in the definition is a vehicle muffler. The specific prohibitions in 78.7. So the following activities are specifically prohibited. Impulse noise like vehicle backfiring, engine racing, and unnecessary vehicular horn blowing that disturbs people. So it's vehicular. Igniting fireworks after 10:30 except for the town. Refusing, hindering, or interfering with enforcement of any provision in this chapter. And blasting between 5 p.m. and 8 a.m. But outside of that time frame, blasting is exempt from this noise regulation as long as there's a permit for that blasting. The following activities have more stringent nighttime hour restrictions and are exempt from regulation at all other times. Construction, demolition, power tools, and home maintenance tools are not to be operated between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. weekdays and 7 p.m. and 9 a.m. weekends unless that activity can meet the noise level requirements for nighttime hours. So people are permitted to engage in those activities during those times, but they have to be within the levels set for nighttime hours. At all other times, which would mean 7 p.m., which would mean 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. on weekdays and 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. on weekends, they're completely exempt from these noise regulations. Landscaping and yard maintenance equipment are not to be operated between 8:30 p.m. and 7 a.m. on weekdays and between 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. on weekends unless that activity can meet the noise level requirements for nighttime hours. So it's not specifically prohibited for noise that can meet the nighttime hour requirements. And at all other times, these activities are exempt. And we extended these hours in response to our colleagues' suggestions in committee, both in the March meeting. We tried to take that into account, that we wanted to push the time, especially for the weekends, to 8 p.m. for yard maintenance and landscaping. So we did that, and then after a discussion in LNA, Representative Steele asked whether we could push it to 8:30, so we did that for the weekday hours. And the last element that we added that is a big change for the ordinance is the variance procedure, and that's a way for people to be able to have events and get around some of these noise restrictions. It's hopefully going to give some flexibility and allow a case-by-case decision to be made. I don't know if I should keep going to explain the changes that I made before LNA and then after LNA, or if you just want to go into the questions.
Does anybody have any questions on what was presented so far? Representative Gale? Make it quick. I got to get home and do some blasting.
Will do. Hannigal District 6. First of all, I just want to thank you for working so hard on incorporating so many of the ideas that came up the last time that we heard this. And it's obvious that you guys really worked through this, everyone that was involved. This is just a tiny little thing, but I really think it's not a good idea to have a different time for the weekend for the lawn maintenance than for the weekday. I just think it's too confusing. And what is the point with just pushing it on the weekend also to 8:30? I mean, is that such a big hill to die on, to have that also be 8:30 and not confuse everyone?
Thank you, and I'll check with the co-sponsors. Okay.
Representative Gerber?
Bill Gerber, District 2. Ms. Representative Vergara, thank you for all your work, and Ms. Israel, thank you very much. After reading the state statute, I just want to make sure I'm looking at this right. We have a state statute that is based on decibel levels, purely on decibel levels. We have local police who are supposed to abide by the state statute, but they don't carry the meters to be able to enforce the state statute because they would need decibel level meters, and they don't carry them. There's only one in the department. So they can't enforce the state statute. Is that correct?
Yes, the state statute is completely driven by decibel levels, and it requires a sound meter, and by them actively not using that equipment, it's impossible to enforce that, which is why they're using criminal statutes like breach of peace and
right, but we
disturbance.
do have a state statute based on decibel levels. It's not being enforced. In fact, it can't be enforced unless they put decibel level meters in their cars or whatever and bring them out when they need them. And so what I then, by reading the state statute, I realized that it's a catch-22, that we can talk about the state statute all we want, but unless our police are willing to put those meters in their cars, it's useless. So that the plainly audible threshold, which is used in some other towns, is only really there because they're not carrying meters in order to be able to enforce the state statute with meters, because they can't. Is that a fair statement?
It's a standard that we wanted to include because we thought it would give more flexibility to the police to enforce the language in our ordinance without the use of a decibel reader.
But if they had decibel readers, they would never really need to resort to the plainly audible. It would be a thoroughly objective, they could use those meters. Right?
Yes, but sometimes I do understand that that there's just not access, but it would be helpful if there were more meters and they were tuned or tested the right way, and a little training. But and I believe Attorney Baldwin mentions that there are apps on phones as well that are available too, which could be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I read a research paper on the NIOSH phone app, and it's like a R squared of 0.97 with like more expensive meters. So, you know, you can do it that way, but I understand if it has to be something certified and tested, that's fine. So I just want to make sure I understood, because there was a lot of discussion, hey, we have this statute, why don't we follow it? But we can't for the catch-22 I mentioned is that we won't enforce it. We can't enforce it without meters, and there currently no plan to buy those meters and train people to use them and put them in their cars. So what I saw when I compared the two, I mean, the main difference was some tweaking in hours, like Representative Gale said, you know, tweaking, because I think the state statute is consistent throughout the week, including weekends, if I recall. And we've also sort of tweaked some of the levels. They have a matrix. The state statute has a matrix of levels coming from one source, commercial, to another source, residential, coming from industrial to residential, and it's very complicated. So we are putting in place one standard decibel level, you know, chart for night and day. So to me, I didn't really see anything controversial. As long as I've got everything right, this is actually really not a very controversial ordinance. It's just essentially taking the state statute and basically saying, you know, our police may want to change their minds, you know, but they may want to go to meters because it's more objective as opposed to subjective. You know, can I hear the words to that song? But that is one way to overcome the differences here. The other thing is, I just want to comment that I've gotten recently several complaints from people who have called me because of this. They've seen you talking about this at the meetings, and these are people around Sacred Heart who say the walls of their houses is like vibrating, and that there's a lot of confusion when they call the police. Some people say, oh, we can't do that. We can't even enforce these laws. That's not what we do. Like, there's a lot of confusion about what they can and can't do, what's under their purview and not. So for me, it makes sense to have one consolidated rule that incorporates what's in the state statute. You wouldn't want to have two separate ones, because even our police, some of them, I think, really aren't aware of what this is. And so if you had it all in one source, like what you're doing, at least they can read one thing and not have to read both and compare the greater of the two. So I think you're going about it the right way.
Thanks. Yeah, I do think that our ordinance is a little bit more stringent, which is specifically allowed by state statute, not the decibel levels or anything like that, but like you said, how we have the weekend hours differentiated a little bit from the weekday, which is something that Fairfield has done for a while. And the plainly audible would just be giving a little bit more discretion to the police, and that is not included in the state.
So I would just recommend to my colleagues here, if you have issues with this, you probably should read the state statute in detail, and you'll probably come to the same conclusion that I did, because I didn't do that prior to like 2 weeks ago, and my view has completely changed about this ordinance.
Thank you, Representative Gerber. Representative Astorita.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ken Astorita, District 10. So I appreciate you definitely took the feedback, and I see the work that's been done, and I thank you for doing that. I'm trying to understand the plainly audible standard, and the only way I can try to understand is by giving you a concrete example. So you've got in here how it addresses basically like, you know, radios and that kind of stuff, right? So I understand that. How does a scenario where, you know, my neighbor who's, you know, 200 feet away has 30 people in his backyard for a barbecue, there's no music, but it's 11 o'clock at night and I can hear, you know, everybody plainly laughing, having a good time. Where does that fit in here?
The plainly audible wouldn't apply to that situation. And I suppose if the police were called to that, they could use the decibel level, the decibel reader, to determine whether it was violating the levels based on whether it's daytime or nighttime. But because it's, you know, they're human voices and unamplified, it's specifically excluded now in our ordinance from any regulation.
So in theory, in a case like that, unless they exceeded the decibel levels, they're fine, right?
Yes, yeah. And like I said, if you're just talking about the human voices, the talking, that's not regulated by this ordinance. If it were some kind of repetitive, loud impulse noise where there's some kind of banging that continues, I really don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe, and it's long enough and repetitive enough for someone to complain about it and it to be still going on when the police arrive, that might be something that they could take the decibel reading for.
So is the intent of this ordinance to replace or take priority of the state statutes, or are they intended to be used in tandem? That's the other thing I'm trying to figure out.
No,
here.
this would eclipse the state regulations. I mean, what is required by state statute is that we take the baseline requirements from the state regulations, and we have to be at least as stringent as the state regulations, but we can be more stringent than them. So our current ordinance, there are problems because we're not as stringent in some areas as the state regulations, and that's what we tried to change. And especially with, the daytime hours and the fact that our weekend hours were extending into all the way till 11 o'clock. And for the state, nighttime begins at 10 p.m. Like I think Representative Gale or Representative Gerber said, regardless of whether it's weekdays or weekends, 10 p.m. start.
So just one other question. I saw that Chief Calamares is a co-sponsor, but after we had the meeting back in March, he seemed to indicate that this wasn't being driven by the police. So I want to make sure I understand.
He was not a co-sponsor, but we did work with the police. We met with them quite a few times, and we tinkered with it based on their input. From the way that I read his response, I think that they're comfortable with the way that they're responding to noise complaints. But to us receiving complaints from people around Fairfield saying that they want the noise ordinance to be enforced, we're just trying to mediate the two interests so that it can come to a middle ground where there are more tools for the police to actually enforce our local ordinance and be responsive to the people outside of these really onerous criminal statutes.
So this is where I'm trying to get at, because I've had a couple of instances where I have had to call the police because I heard Kid Rock coming on at 2 o'clock in the morning from my neighbor on a Tuesday night. But be that as it may, I aspire to be the grumpy old man in the neighborhood at some point who doesn't want to hear anybody's noise. But what concerns me about this is what I don't want to see, and again, this has to go back with people abusing things because unfortunately we know that, but what I don't want to see is the grumpy old man that I aspire to be able to use something like this to really, be a jerk in the neighborhood. And that's what I'm trying to get over right now, and I'm on the fence on it.
The police are the enforcement agent, and it's within their discretion to not only determine which method they use when they arrive at a scene and there's been a complaint made, but also to determine what's excessive noise.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Representative Astorita. Representative Zesma?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Liz Esma, District 4. Thank you, guys, for how much work you've put into this, and my apologies to the last working group for not also the sponsors saying the same thing. And Alyssa, thank you for all of your work behind the scenes. So I appreciate that you're clarifying once again for public clarification that we're here because of a lack of enforcement of a state statute, which is extremely unfortunate. However, I'm happy that the police have worked so closely with you, and even before these changes were made in response to L&A concerns, they were not only providing input, but seemed to be appreciative of many of your initial proposals. Can you tell us, number one, what is the issue with not having enough devices to measure noise? And is there a commitment from Chief Calamares that even though we are now doing this by local control, which I think most of us would agree is to our benefit, in our favor, and responding to the public, I have not received one email where somebody did not want an ordinance. Is there a commitment now, especially to Representative Astorita's point, where the police department will acquire more of this equipment? And do we know if it was a funding issue? Do we know what the reason is that they're not enforcing the statute?
I don't know why there's only one. I hope that there's more purchased, or maybe that they look into maybe using the phone as one of their devices or playing around with that. But I think it's up to the police to determine how they're going to be enforcing this local ordinance. I do hope that they enforce the ordinance because it's, it was written by a group of people who represented all of Fairfield in 1985, a really long time ago, and we've consistently revised it and said that Fairfield wants their own noise regulations that reflect our community, and it's not just mirroring the state regulations. So I think that's significant because, our body is the people, and that should be showing what the people want, and it's a quality of life issue. So if people's complaints aren't being responded to, it's problematic. It affects property rights, some of this noise pollution, if it's not resolved. And if it has to get to the point where it's becoming, a public disturbance, or even a greater problem, criminal, that's a really high bar. So hopefully this lower bar for our local ordinance can be used and help people to address these disputes.
Thank you very much. One last question. Do you know what the recourse is when a local ordinance is not enforced as it has been approved to be done?
I think it's in the police's discretion to determine. I don't know.
Thank you. I mean, it would be really egregious if the body that is, or the department, or however you want to describe it, is charged with enforcement, doesn't do it, and I would hope that we don't face that situation. But thank you again for your work.
Thank you, Representative Zesma. Representative Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Jeff Steele, District 2. I guess when this first came to us, I look at ordinances because we just had an ordinance we dealt with here with the Fair Rent Commission, but now we have noise, so we look at intent versus impact, and I think the intent on all of these is not bad, it's the impact, and that's what Ed was just mentioning with the Fair Rent Commission. So what are the three goals that you want to put forward to pass this? One is to be more responsive to constituent concerns, okay? That makes sense. I look at the numbers alone, which is a little concerning. There were, in the heat of COVID, 475 complaints 2021, 374 in 2022. It's gone down to 39 in 2023. So it's 888 complaints. Of those, there were 40 infractions and 2 misdemeanors. So out of the 40 infractions, 4 were not in the beach area. And I keep being told that this is not a beach issue. But I look at the data here, that's 90% are in the beach. Then if you add in the infractions and the misdemeanors, that's 6 out of 42 that are not in the beach area. That's 86%. So there's been literally 6 complaints that have come in over the last 3 years outside the beach area. So I'm just trying to understand that. But that was one. Okay.
That's just the those are the
I understand.
things
I understand.
that were actually enforced.
Right.
And I don't know the details of that, but we added some data that can address this issue because it's a misconception that this is only beach area. There's data that Ms. Israel put together that's from a year analysis, and it shows that the beach area is
Okay.
only 30%
I'd
of
love to
these
see that
complaints.
data. I'd love to see that data. But the other thing is, so that's also because police discretion determined that that's what should be put forward as an infraction or misdemeanor. That's my opinion, police discretion. The other thing is to give police more tools and more discretion. Yet I've seen publicly written that they don't think this is a tool. This takes away their discretion and pits neighbors against neighbors. But to address that issue, we apparently have someone from the police department online. I'd like to hear what they say, and I know you've worked with him and them, which is crucial, but I think it's important we hear what he has to say. He's on the line, and we can ask questions of him as well. I think for all of us to feel more comfortable with it.
Hi, Captain Waya.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Thanks for having me, and thanks for giving me an opportunity to kind of speak on these issues. So I want to start by saying this just to kind of set the record straight. When we're approached by members of the RTM about a quality of life issue that they feel passionately about, we want to be as accommodating and supportive as possible, and we definitely appreciate that our insight would be sought. But I think there's a blurry line between offering insights and offering opinions, and another blurry line between offering opinions and then all of a sudden becoming a co-author of the ordinance, which obviously the police do not write legislation. We are the executors of the law. So in retrospect, the police department should have drawn some more clear lines earlier on regarding our involvement. And by not doing so in our efforts to make ourselves accessible, I believe our intentions were maybe misconstrued, misrepresented, or a little bit of both. So to kind of set the record straight for both philosophical reasons as well as procedural reasons, we do prefer to continue enforcing noise violations the way we always have, which allows us the maximum amount of discretion. It allows us to take the most people-centric approach, which is really important to us. And it helps us to consider the human element and a totality of circumstances. So I can definitely expand a little bit more on that because I hear some comments about, it's unfortunate that there's statutes out there that the bodies that we rely on to enforce those statutes are refusing to enforce those statutes. And that's not exactly a fair representation of what's happening. So from a philosophical standpoint, one word that police hold very dearly to is the word discretion. And the deeper meaning behind that word is that it allows us to consider the human element. And it allows us to take a people-centric approach to policing. And one of our main concerns is that the tone of the noise enforcement specific statutes and the local ordinance that we're trying to model after them is that they're kind of a throwback to a very robotic way of policing. It's very black and white. It's very cause and effect. It's got timetables. It's got decibel levels. And regarding the police profession overall, but especially here in Fairfield, we've done a lot of work to get on board with 21st century policing concepts, which is a very people-centric, community-centric way of policing. And we're trying to move away from that robotic enforcement-centric method of policing. So I think by and large, the majority of the community we serve would agree that the modern people-centric approach is the right approach to 99% of our engagements with the public. Further, from a procedural and practicality standpoint, we're going to talk about the decibel meter. So there's a few issues we have with switching to the town ordinance as written. So you can't follow a table of decibels, times, and distances without having officers walk around with a sound meter in one hand and a rolling measuring tape in the other. And that's just not practical from a functional standpoint or from an officer safety standpoint. Some of the other issues, switching to using the town ordinance means we can't use the technology that we use to issue tickets, e-tickets, which is currently how we issue infractions. The officer sits in the car, types in the information, and out pops a ticket. So we are taking a step back technology-wise to go back to filling out paper citations for the town ordinance. And that's not a deal breaker, but it is another thing that we consider because it changes our processes that we have to sell to the officers. And on this last point, I could be wrong, so please correct me if I am, but I think if we issue a violation of a town ordinance, the town has to provide a method and process for appeal like we do with the parking violations. And to my knowledge, that mechanism of appeal doesn't exist yet for the noise ordinance. So, and I also wanted to comment on something else I heard earlier. I can't say for sure, but my guess is that yes, to some degree, it probably would increase our calls for service. That in and of itself is not the concern, but the concern is that it would be abused or weaponized by some people involved in neighbor disputes and then used to call out the police for quote unquote not doing their job, when in fact we are very much doing our job. We show up, we speak to both parties, we assess the totality of circumstances, we apply a test of what's objectively reasonable, we make a decision and we implement that decision. But when the person who makes the complaint doesn't like that decision and we didn't deliver them their desired outcome, a lot of times that is twisted into the police didn't do their job. So I just wanted to clarify those things. If you have any more questions for me, please feel free to ask.
Thank you.
I just want to.
I would just like to respond to that, and thank you, Captain Waya, for your input, and thank you for the time that you spent with us. It was a lot of hours. I wish that the appeal process had been raised, and I'm surprised that a town attorney hadn't discovered that issue, since it is an active ordinance from 1985. And if that is an issue in terms of enforcement, we can add an appeals process, and I'd ask Attorney Baldwin to help us with that. In terms of the enforcement, again, I want to turn everybody's attention to the supporting documents included in the backup, and you can see some emails from some other police departments in the state where it is very straightforward in terms of enforcement, and it's not all that complicated. People measure distances with headlights of their patrol cars. They carry around the decibel readings in Bloomfield, as well as switching back and forth when they need to, like he said, for discretion with the plainly audible standard, which they say in these two emails, it gives them the discretion that they need. So I think that other police departments have appreciated getting this as an additional tool, and several other towns have had no problems with enforcement of the local ordinance.
Representative Steele, you had more?
Yeah, there was the third point is that you want to add daytime hours. And how does that work when many of the devices around the home would themselves exceed the decibels that you've put standards for? I mean, I look at...
The measurement is from the receptor.
Yeah.
So the only way that the decibel reading would be able to pick up any of that is if it's like right next to it, and that wouldn't be the receptor. It's the complainant is the receptor. The emitter is the person in the other home making the noise.
By the way, an electric mower is 74 decibels, and a regular mower is about 80 decibels. So a trimmer is about 90 decibels, and a gas-powered trimmer is 100 decibels. So, I mean, all these are going to be exceeding, whether it's electric or gas-powered. I mean, they're all high in decibel ratings. But if you say that's...
But they're excluded for most part of the day. They're excluded from these regulations for most part of the day.
Okay, I'll stop there.
Captain Waya, this is Drew Georgiades, District 9. I want to thank you for coming on. You and I have worked together on some issues in the beach area that do not deal with noise, so I want to thank you for that. And I do think your comment about modern and have ease of use, I think that's what the plainly audible adds, especially since the decibel readers have not been working for you guys. So I'm looking forward to adding that so that it's easier for you, because we have been receiving emails from other parts of town, just constituents in general, where they say that they claim that they have called and their complaint says that it can't be addressed. So in a community like Fairfield, I think we have a fantastic community, and you guys do a great job making everybody feel heard and safe, and this will add to that. So I just want to thank you for your support.
Representative Gale.
Thank you very much. This is me again, District 6 still. I just wanted to say that this complainant who emailed us all regarding Sacred Heart and started this conversation with these Sacred Heart neighbors, doesn't the ordinance, completely exclude schools? So, like, it wouldn't address their issues anyway. What the person that I emailed back and forth with talked about, and it sounds like it's what Representative Gerber was also talking about, was that these people who live near Sacred Heart, they're experiencing really loud noise, and she said that in the past the police would come and check the decibel level, and then they would go and ask for it to be turned down to comply with the decibel level. So, I think that, generally speaking, that's the kind of thing that we want, is there to be just cooperation between people. But with a school situation like what's going on at Sacred Heart, I'm not sure we can make these people happy no matter what we do, because the circumstances have changed. They're living in an area that has changed since they started living there, and there's just a lot more people there and a lot more institutional events going on. So, I don't know. We have to find, some sort of just general decibel levels that the schools are allowed to emit or something like that. I don't think it can be addressed by this ordinance, is my point.
The current ordinance should be addressing the issues that are occurring right now. It doesn't even need to be changed, because a lot of this is occurring in the nighttime hours, and it does include the schools. The language only exempts public activities and celebrations sanctioned by the state or the town. So neither Fairfield University nor Sacred Heart University qualify for that exemption.
Right, but just being human, you cannot ask an enormous institution like Sacred Heart to not have any events or that go on past such a and what is it? What did you say? 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock? I mean, it's too
10.
early. Okay,
It's happening
early.
depending on the frequency, so they can apply for variances under the new language. But if this is a recurrent, repetitive situation, yes, they do have to abide by these regulations. This is a residential area. People bought this property. It will decrease their property values if this continues. And there's a reason why there are noise regulations. This is a nuisance. It's in law. We need to balance people's property rights and their interests against your rights to do things. And the universities can take on soundproofing measures. It's not a new science. It doesn't cost that much, and it's just being respectful of your neighbors.
I can see that point, but then I would say that it would need to be addressed in a different way than just through this regulation. And the people whose property values you're discussing, well, their property values have also increased because of the value of having these wonderful institutions in our town.
And Hannah, I really appreciate your interest, and maybe we can work together, and you can help us and sit on a group like this, and you can give your ideas, and we can write something that would work. So I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Gale. Representative Iacono.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Pia Iacono, District 8. Captain, thank you so much for being here this evening and sharing that insight with us and coming out and clarifying a lot of things that have been stated on the record, and especially saying, on behalf of the police department, that you're comfortable with what we have right now, which makes me comfortable as well. I very much worry about, getting into too much overreach here. And I do think we need to think about modern policing. It's all you hear about all the time. I also just wanted to, have there's a couple of things that have given me pause, and that's one that, there's some reliance on an individual citizen, one in a town of 60,000 people, that had the money, the means, the opportunity to actually pay someone to put together a private consult and then get it in front of an RTM group and get it in front of this body. I don't think that's really a good standard to have, because not everybody has the money to do that. Secondly, a paid consultant's going to paint a picture of where you want something to go. If I had an extra $10,000 lying around that I could get this going in a different direction, then I'd work on that too. So that alone gives me pause. There are still some things in here that I think that need to be addressed in order for them to be in better working order, and I really truly want to thank the sponsors who took the time to make adjustments. They're huge improvements. You listened. I love the spirit of exchanging ideas. I really appreciate it, and I know you spent a ton of time working on this. It's really to be commended. The areas that are still outstanding, I believe Representative Agaria had an opportunity to have a conversation with Representative Bateson, and I share some of the concerns. I'm worried about the commercial haulers and the transfer stations. I'm also worried about our golf courses. This is maintenance that has to get done early in the morning, and it can't just be a carve-out to allow only the public golf course in town to get their work done. We have 3 other courses in town that are going to need an opportunity to get that same work out, so I hope that there's consideration given for that. And I too still remain concerned about the whole standard for the daytime hours. I think that's the biggest sticking point that remains of concern to me. And the biggest thing is I'm looking to make our police department's job easier, not more difficult. So, that's weighing on me in the back of my mind. But I think we've done a lot of good work. I think we've gotten to some really good places on compromise, and I truly appreciate that. But I still think there's some room to grow there.
Representative Iacona, I just want to, being a golfer and often playing at 8 a.m., all the maintenance people are out there before playing, and it's very easy to move the mowers around and not get close to the residential areas prior to the times. It just takes a little coordination. So I don't think that is really an issue. Again, I'd like to remind everybody, this is an ordinance. The only time it's triggered is when someone complains. So, it's not like all of a sudden everything is going to be, the police are going to be out there forced to do whatever. But I believe in the police. I know they're here. They're willing to do their job. They're hired to do the job. We are the body that makes the laws. We are the legislative body, and it's their job. They get paid to enforce the laws that we pass as a body. So, and that's why what we're elected to do. So thank you for your comments, Representative Iacona.
Thank you. Representative McCormick.
Karen McCormick, District 2. I do want to acknowledge the hard work that's gone into creating the language in the original version, and as well as some of the amendments that you went back through L&A on. I tend to agree with Representative Steele in that I think that this is for the most part, this is a problem that emanates from the beach area, and I mentioned that the last time this came before the body. I did receive an email from somebody who lives in the beach area, and one of the comments referenced the effect that this ordinance will have on events at Penfield and Burr Mansion. And this person sent me an email. It was several paragraphs long, and I'm just going to leave the body with this one quote, which I think kind of sums it up. This is the old, I moved next to the airport and then start complaining about air traffic. When you move to the beach area, you have to be prepared for a very active summer. Cars, people, college kids, lawn work, music, parties, etc. It's what makes it so special. please don't let restrictions like this get passed. I, for one, like a very active and vibrant town and well-maintained lawns, of course. And that, to me, is very compelling. I think that this is something that, you know, I still think it needs some tweaks to make sure it doesn't overstep, and I'm very, very concerned about the comments of Captain Way, which seem to suggest that despite some comments made here tonight, he feels and the department seems to feel that they have all the tools they need to enforce the laws that will allow us to live peacefully and in harmony with one another. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative McCormick. Representative.
Could I just respond to one thing?
Sure.
I just feel like I need to just speak for that neighborhood around Burr because it was egregious what they experienced and completely unacceptable. And it was not the normal course of business for the beach area for them to endure that. I have heard people who paid millions of dollars for their homes say that they experienced trauma from all of those events. A family with a 2-year-old sitting at a dining room table should not be able to hear the words of WAP while they eat their dinner. So I take that really seriously, and if someone can help me come up with a better solution, but it's not enough to say that there's an administrator who's taking these really serious problems into consideration now, and now these people are protected. At this point, it needs to be in words, and so they can solidly rely on the fact that that will not happen to them again.
And to follow up on that, the Burr Mansion specifically was not a venue that had weekly events until 4-5 years ago. So there's no historical precedent for that. It was a quiet neighborhood, maybe 4 events annually. So that comment is not correct.
Representative Gerber.
Bill Gerber, District 2. A question for Captain Wyatt. In your view, are we enforcing the state statute? Because it's my understanding that we're not attempting to enforce the state noise statute because we can't if we don't have people carrying decibel meters.
Right, and that's what I was saying before, is that we're not using the noise-specific state statutes. We are using infractions for creating a public disturbance, and in the more extreme cases, we're using misdemeanor summonses for breach of peace or disorderly conduct, where somebody would have to make a court appearance.
So I hear you, but are we allowed to ignore the state noise statute?
We have the discretion to use the statutes that we feel fit the situation.
Okay, so we have the discretion to ignore the state noise statute. I'm surprised by that.
It's not ignoring it. We are applying the statutes that we feel fit the best, and we can't enforce the state statutes without the decibel meters.
Right. So the state statute is about noise, excessive noise. It's not about, the state noise statute's not about breach of peace. So I just wanted to clarify that we keep talking about here, this body, about allowing the police discretion. But the problem is there is a state noise statute that was created because over a certain decibel level can be noise pollution. It can be damaging for the person receiving and the complainant. And we're not enforcing that. We're enforcing something else. So I think that's what I'm confused about. I didn't know we had that sort of discretion. We are ignoring the state noise statute.
No, we are not ignoring a statute. We are making a calculated decision to use the statutes that we feel apply better. There are lots of statutes that are antiquated that we don't use because there are better statutes that fit our community, and that's what we are doing.
Okay, but I just want to be clear. I've gotten emails from people like around Sacred Heart who have used decibel meters that were registering, 65. And when they called, the police said, oh, you should call, the security at Sacred Heart and talk to them. I think there's a real lack of communication about what the appropriate way of resolving these things, and it can really ruin someone's life. If they've been there for 20 years, and I love Sacred Heart. I think it's I love the fact that it's expanding, but they should have to consider noise to the neighbors when they construct, or not put up noise, noise buffering solutions. Right now, there's almost nothing stopping them from expanding without considering that. So I think there's a reason for these state statutes, and there's a reason why Ms. Vicara and Ms. Israel sort of pursued this line, because we need something objective. And if we don't have the manpower to go after this, I mean, that's sort of a separate discussion. Maybe we need some, slightly different way of going about that. But I mean, it's an objective way of measuring noise.
So I'm not familiar with the Sacred Heart issue, so I will look that up and see what's going on there. I did not get any emails about it. Just on the issue raised earlier about where the majority of the complaints are, I don't have the stats in front of me, but I can speak anecdotally as the person who has to review the shift activity from the night and the evening before. The noise complaints that I see by and large are in the beach area. And the statutes that we use, public disturbance, breach of peace, disorderly conduct, they all have a noise factor in them that we use to consider. So it's not that by opting to use those statutes over the noise specific statutes that we're not addressing noise. That is in most cases what we are referring to. There are several situations that justify each of those statutes. Excessive noise that causes alarm or inconvenience, that's one of those things that we consider to justify using those statutes.
Captain White, Drew Georgiadis again. I just want to clarify for the group here, you're specifically assigned to the beach area, is that correct? Because I get an email from you every week with the beach update. You specifically...
Among many things, I oversee issues down in the beach area, but I supervise all patrol operations, all detective bureau operations, school safety, crisis intervention, the new social worker. That's all under my bureau.
Okay, thank you very much.
And thanks for answering my questions, Captain.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you. Representative McCabe.
Representative McCabe, District 4. In the course of this discussion, it's become maybe clear to me, but now I'm not so certain, so I'm going to look to Representative Vergara to clarify that this ordinance is actually not particularly dramatic, but if anything, it's almost putting clarity around practice that it seems to already be in place. I think Captain Wiley made the excellent point that there are statutes that are antiquated and require some updating. And I think that this is what we're seeing here, and that this ordinance is a response to what we're hearing from our constituents. In District 4, I'm hearing it as well, and that is not a beach area of town. Not to mention the fact if it's a big problem in the beach area, just because I'm in District 4, I still care about those residents. But it seems that we're responding to our constituents and working in partnership with enforcement. And I think that we're actually suggesting, if I'm not mistaken, to move away from the robotic policeman of being reliant on a decibel reader that is onerous to actually, we're offering an ordinance that supports the practice that's already happening, which is the use of discretion. But instead of the punishment being extremely severe to the offender, we're actually affording an option that is less severe, and the fines will actually go to the town. That would allow us to invest in things like, I don't know, like noise prevention wall insulation for Burr as a possibility. So it seems like we're adding daytime hours, which people appreciate and is not a big deal. We're adding some clarity around time, which you've taken the input from the body to make it less restrictive. And we're actually indoctrinating a practice that seems to already be happening where the police can use their discretion. But in this instance, we're freeing them from the robotic, non-community policing decibel reader. Am I mistaken?
No, that's perfectly stated, and I wish I could have stated it that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative McCabe. Representative Bateson.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ed Bateson, District 1. Adding the plainly audible standard during the daytime to me is a big deal. I struggle with the way that that's going to be applied, but also to what we do here in this room. It sends a message to how we feel as a community. And enacting something like this for the daytime, it sends a message that be quiet. I understand somebody could say, respect your neighbor, but this community has changed so much in the 50 plus years that I've lived here. I mean, it is so vibrant now. It's young, it's eclectic. I mean, outdoor dining on the post road. I mean, so many things have changed that, quite frankly, I appreciate, and I've changed along with it. The beach community, Sacred Heart, Fairfield U, all these things that happen in our community that I've just learned to live with. I've lived my life. I lived on Roland Road. I lived on Fairfield Beach Road. I lived on Paulding. The neighborhood has gone through change. The town has gone through change. We enact this. It sends a message that I just don't agree with during the day. I agree at night. I think plainly audible at night is a reasonable standard, your nighttime hours. But during the day, I just think it sends a message that I just don't agree with, that, keep it down. I don't know. It rubs me the wrong way. And that standard, I can't go with it.
May I respond?
Go ahead, Representative Burr.
Okay. I honestly didn't see the plainly audible as a more stringent requirement or level or restriction. It always seemed to me a good solution for helping to provide another tool for the police, like Representative McCabe said, just mirroring what their practice seems to be right now. Just determining what's the reasonable level of noise and whether that's violating breach of peace or whatever. Now they can use that basic standard too for enforcing the noise ordinance. So I guess I'm putting trust in the police's determination of what that excessive noise and what that reasonableness is when called to a daytime situation.
Thank you, Representative Steele.
Thank you, Jeff Steele, District 2. I still have some concern with why you're saying that discretion is increased when the captain just said their discretion is taken away. I mean, that's a big difference. Here's the captain in the police force who deals with these types of issues, among others. They get 55,000 calls per year. And he said his discretion will be taken away. This will not be a tool. This will not help them. But you're saying, yes, it will.
Well,
no, they have more discretion. I just don't understand.
I heard him say that the old way, the rubric of having the emitter and receptor and the different levels and decibels is antiquated and restrictive and rigid. But I didn't hear him say that for this new plainly audible standard, which is a new standard. It's not antiquated. It's something new that towns have been implementing. And I'm hopeful that it can increase their discretion.
Captain, if you could just comment on that, in terms of,
Yeah.
there's still this belief that your discretion is increased, but I don't know. How to say that.
In our previous conversations, plainly audible was a better option than following decibel tables and timetables and stuff like that. And the way I explained it was, right now, the way we make these determinations is what we think is objectively reasonable based on our eyes and ears. So the plainly audible method does align a little bit better with our discretion than the previous version of the ordinance.
Thank you, Representative Steele. Representative Pistilli.
Sharon Pistilli, District 3. In terms of process, my understanding was that we really had it like down to a couple of issues the last time we discussed the ordinance, and then it was going to go to LNA. We were going to work out the couple of issues, and that we are quite close. And then now it seems like there's more issues. Ms. Vergara, could you please summarize like what was changed since the last time we met and what feedback you took from our colleagues and where we've landed, and if these items that are brought up now are in addition to what we already said was going to be discussed in LNA?
Thank you, Representative Pistilli. I am open-minded to entertaining changes still, and I do think that changes can be made on the floor as well. But these are the changes that I've made since presenting to you all in March. I spelled out the daytime hours rather than defining them just solely around what the nighttime hours were. I changed the weekend schedule for the nighttime hours to start at 10 p.m. to be compliant with state regulation. Plainly audible was clarified throughout because I received feedback that it wasn't clear in the ordinance the way it was written, and to emphasize that the standard only applies to noise produced by sound production devices. The 24-hour reset, which was removed, was put back in place with a one-year reset in response to Representative Iacono's input. And we chose the one-year reset because it's consistent with our alarm ordinance and with Norwalk's noise ordinance. We added the unamplified human voice in the exclusions because of some people's reservations. We took out instruments in the sound production device. Oh, but that was after LNA. This is just for after March. We clarified the public celebrations with examples that could be exempted. We changed the fireworks provision to allow for permitted fireworks before 10:30. We increased exemption times for landscaping and yard work to 8 to 8 p.m. weekdays and 9 to 8 p.m. weekends. And we added a variance procedure to hopefully give more flexibility and allow for case-by-case analysis of different events if people want to hold them. And then after LNA, we changed the daytime hours back to 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. for the weekdays. We clarified the chart in 78.5, the noise level standards, so that we could clarify that the decibel measurements can apply to all types of noise, but the plainly audible only applies, depending on what the police want to use, only applies to sound production devices. And for 78.8 specific prohibitions, we divided the subsection A into separate paragraphs to allow for a broader time span for the landscaping and yard maintenance equipment. And that's it.
Representative Vergara, when was the first time you asked our Republican colleagues for input on this ordinance?
I believe we reached out individually, not through the caucus leader, about a year ago. I can't remember exactly.
Okay, so can we just come up with a list of what the final things are that we're concerned about and put this to bed now? Because we're starting to feel like Charlie Brown and Lucy with the football.
Mr. Murray?
Representative Iacona?
Listen, I think this has been a good process. This is what you do when you have an ordinance. An ordinance is a law, and they're not meant to be easy to change. It's a law, and it's a very long process, and some of them take years to happen. You know, repeatedly we're getting comments about the Republican caucus. I was not asked as the caucus leader to go to my caucus with this until it was already on the books. Yes, you're absolutely right. Individuals were asked if they wanted to work on it. They turned that opportunity down. Quite frankly, people are not going to work on an ordinance when they don't think the ordinance needs to be changed. And that's why you're not getting people signing on to something. If they don't believe in it, they aren't signing on to it. So I'm sorry if the process is sloppy and long, but it's a law. This is how things happen. And on this particular instance, I really commend the sponsors for their open-mindedness, taking the feedback and working on it. That's what we do. And it's, to me, been a very good process where we are right now. So, you know, I just want to put that whole issue to bed of the when and the where and the why and the not and the this and the that. And, you know, that's what it is. I've been on this body for 10 years. Some of these things don't even get through a session. They have to get picked up again. We worked on the last noise ordinance, Representative Vergara and I know. I mean, you know, there is a lot of camaraderie going on here. So let's not take a positive and make it a negative. And again, I do want to thank you.
Thank you, Representative Iacona. She was responding to you, Sharon, but if you have, I'm not going to listen to any more tit for tat back and forth. If there's something specific that hasn't been said already, it's 11:45. I feel like crap, so let's get to the point we're not voting on. Again, we're not voting on this item until June 26th.
I'll be quick with my tit for
Okay.
tat. Just
So,
Ken
Representative Astorita.
Ken Astorita, District 10. The one thing that we did ask, and we're not hearing until tonight, was the police's input. So I would like to just point that out. We did not have that the last time. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Baldwin, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I'll make it brief. I just want to kind of defend the police's position with respect to enforcing the statute. The statute does not have any enforcement provisions with respect to municipal police forces, but rather it's an enforcement provision which is established towards DEEP, the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, or when it was originally passed well over 30 years ago, the Department of Environmental Protection. So there is no enforcement mechanism to which the police are expected to apply to that state statute, but rather it is entirely left to DEEP.
Thank you. Any other, I don't know what he just said about DEEP, but I'm not sure that helped us at all, but thanks, Jim.
Well, I think it's important that it was heard by everybody, and the police are not ignoring that statute in so many words.
Thank you. Anybody else? Thank you. I appreciate it. No, come on, man. Liz, really?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Liz Esma, District 4. I want to thank the captain for coming, his comments, his work on this, and also for confirming for everyone's knowledge that this ordinance actually does make your job easier and addresses the concerns of our residents, none of whom I want to say, I'm sorry, you bought a house in the wrong place, you'll have to live with it. I agree with Representative Bates, and what this body does matters, and it says something to our community. So thank you again. I support this, and I know we're not voting, but thank you to the captain and to everyone else who worked on this.
Thank you, Representative Zesma. And I want to thank you, Jill. I know how much work you put in this. You've been extremely flexible with the changes you've already made. And I can tell you, I truly appreciate it, and I hope everybody else in this room does. And I think some comments are unfair tonight towards you guys. So I'm going to adjourn the meeting now. We're going to go to committees, and make sure you dial in and record them. And we'll see everybody next Monday night.